We're going to start with a budget public hearing. So I can never remember how this works. So I'd like to open the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2024-25 Lebanon School District budget in the amount of $55,506,420, which includes $53,836,420 for the general fund and $1,670,000 for the food service and grants funds. Is there any public comment on the public hearing, for this public hearing? Is there any comment online?
No comment online.
I do not see anyone. Is there any comment from the board? No. All right, we'll close the public hearing for the budget, fiscal year 2024-2025. And then we will open the public hearing for a proposed donation of $20,000 from Century Restaurants Jersey Mike's for the Lebanon High School Principal donation. Is there any additional information about this amount?
So Jersey Mike's contacted us, and they said traditionally they I guess the whole franchise, they take the first days. I'm going to say first days, maybe it's first weeks. If it's first days, it's pretty good. But profits, and they give it to a local high school. So they asked, would we like that? I said, sure. As far as the principal donation, so we have a line in in every school that is labeled principal donation, and it's really the repository for donations that don't have a specific purpose.
Okay.
So
great.
Is
Go
there
ahead.
a reason it's designated for the high school and not sort of for the school district?
that's what they said to me on the phone. They said they donated to the local high school, is what they said.
Okay.
So.
Good. Go ahead. More questions? Mm-hmm.
Having waited in line on opening day, I think that 20,000 was still.
I think it was. I think that's what they said. Actually, it was opening day. I believe Ian said that earlier.
And do we have any sense of, do we have it earmarked for anything?
I haven't had a conversation with Ian about it. They contacted me in like October, and then it's on here now because it took a while. So I had actually forgotten about it until.
And we've talked about that fund before. It's kind of an open fund for various. They use it for lots of different things.
At the elementary level, they'll use it for classes or a coat or something for some kid. At the high school, Ian could provide detail, and I could get you detail, but I don't know offhand what he would use it for.
$20,000 is a decent amount of money, so
Yeah.
it would be nice to
Have more information.
some sense of what it's going towards.
Agreed. Is there any comment in the room on this public hearing? No? Any comment online?
No public comment online.
Okay. All right, so we will close that public hearing. Thank you. All right, so I'd like to call to order the school board meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, public comment will occur during the public comment portion of the meeting and will be done via raising your hand remotely or in person. During public comment, once acknowledged, please state your name and ward so that it can be included in the minutes. And please limit your time to 3 minutes. Public comment is governed by policy BEDH. Are there any additions or deletions from the agenda?
Not this evening?
There is one from the chair. We will have a brief non-public before committee updates, just FYI for everyone. And we'll open up the floor for public comment. Is there any public comment in the room? I see none. Is there any online?
There's none online.
Okay, so we will close public comment for the time being and return to it at the end of the meeting. Which brings us to the student reports. Nora.
Hello. So, as some of you may know, we have midterms next week, so we are all preparing for that around the high school. Along with midterms, the week after that is Wellness Week that Student Council and the YPA teamed up to host for the whole week after midterms, which is to bring awareness to mental health and create activities for students to interact with to help with that and make it known that it's okay to have mental health days and all that. Student Council is also helping to co-sponsor Hockey Fights Cancer Night for the second year in a row. We are partnering with the Hockey Booster Club. The Hockey Fights Cancer Nights are boys game on Saturday, January 27th at 4:40 p.m. and the girls game on Tuesday, January 30th at 5:50 p.m. So if you can come and support, that would be great. We are having a bake sale, I think. Student Council is making cookies, so yep, that's it.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Nora? Mm-hmm.
I have a question. For just generally, if a student is feeling like they need a mental health day, does that get counted as an unexcused absence?
No, their parents would call them out sick for that day. It would be excused absence.
Okay.
It's not for you, that's another question. Sorry. I have a question. So you were here last year, right? Or you just came this year?
I was here halfway through last year. I came around this time last year.
Okay. So were you here for Wellness Week last year, or did you just miss
I
it?
was, yes, I
Okay.
was, yeah.
So is this week planned to be similar to what happened last year?
Yes, similar. We have a bingo board that we're doing this year, so it's supposed to get more students to interact with mental health awareness, and it's basically if you get 5 in a row, then you get a prize, and then there's also going to be a raffle, I'm pretty sure, where students, if they submit their boards in, then they can get their name put into a raffle. And then we have baskets that Student Council and the YPA make that have mental health, like things like blankets, I think candles, things like that.
Great. Sounds good. Any other questions for Nora? All right, thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Appreciate it. All right, correspondence, Mary.
There's none.
Thank you. All right, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the public minutes and non-public minutes from December 13th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the Lebanon School Board minutes from Wednesday, December 13th, 2023.
All right. Okay, motion by MJ, seconded by Steve. Does anybody have any additions or deletions to the school board meeting minutes? MJ does.
So under number 8, unfinished business, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, we're talking about the self-contained classroom. And it says we're proposing a different model at LMS. Wasn't that at MLS we were proposing that?
Correct.
Okay, so we just need to change that to.
Good. Any others? Any others from anyone else? Okay, so we'll vote to approve the public minutes from the school board meeting of December 13th. All those in favor? Okay, 8-0. Thanks. All right, and we need a motion for the non-public minutes.
Make a motion to approve the non-public minutes from December 13th, 2023.
Okay, motion by MJ, second by Steve. Does anybody have any corrections or additions to those minutes? No, I don't think so. No? All right. All those in favor of approving the non-public meeting minutes from December 13th, please vote. Okay, none opposed. All right, unanimous. Thank you. All right, and now we're going to look at nominations, renominations, and retirements. So there's a correction on your sheet. The second is not a nomination, it's a resignation, just so the second entry on that sheet. Can I get a motion to approve this?
Make a motion to approve the nomination resignation sheet dated January 10th, 2024.
Motion by MJ, second by Steve. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you just tell us, so I think we've all figured out that the salary for Nicole is a prorated salary. What is, I mean, it looks deceiving because you didn't prorate his.
Right.
So it's not really a almost $16,000 savings. So what is her?
Well, that's what, It is for this year because he retired and it's been vacant. So we had
We had no idea.
$97,000 budgeted for this year,
Okay.
and we're gonna pay her $37,000 for the rest of the year.
Okay.
So we are saving $59,000 for this fiscal year.
Okay, and then what will her salary be for next year?
That's a zig I wasn't expecting. Hold on.
Okay, we'll give Tim a minute to look that up. Are there any other questions while he's looking that up? And this, well, there's no one here from LHS, but this resignation for math, I'm assuming this is a position that they're going to fill with someone else.
Yep, they will need that position.
Okay. Okay.
Looks like I have 81,500 roughly.
So there will be, it's budgeted for his salary.
Correct.
For next year, and so there still will be a savings.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor of approving the nominations and resignations sheet dated January 10th, 2024? Please raise your hands. Yes, okay, unanimous, thank you. Okay. That is going to move us on to new business. So, the superintendent, on behalf of the board, invited City Manager Sean Mulholland to come and speak to us about TIF and the RAND case updates, and so we'd invite him to come up and talk to us now. So he doesn't have to sit through the rest of our meeting.
Well, good evening, and I always appreciate the opportunity to come and work with the school board on any of the various issues that we have together, and there are, of course, many of those. So I provided a couple of documents to you, one in regards to TIF that outlines a couple of things. And I wanted to highlight the items, especially in item number 1 in that memo, in particular the last sentence of that. And the superintendent and I have had discussions about this, and the previous superintendent as well, about how we might do things in the future if new TIF districts come on board. So I think that's kind of an important piece, because right now those funds are sequestered from the school district and they're not allowed to be used, especially when you have a TIF district that creates new housing and additional school kids, because that funding you're not getting, but you have the burden that goes along with that, which is now spread across the rest of the tax base. The purpose of a TIF district is to create economic development to revitalize certain areas of the city or towns, depending on whatever you have. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to impact the schools negatively, because that goes backwards if the school has to raise taxes, additional taxes to make up for that cost that's spread across the remaining tax base. So something to think about. And some of the initial discussions that we had is to determine what the cost of this is an interesting question, the cost of an adequate education. It's not $7,300, well, like $25,000 or something like that, that we would figure out what that is here in the city of Lebanon. And any kids that live in developments that are created in that TIF district, the city would remit that money back to the school district. That was the conceptual plan that we came up with when you have TIF districts that have residential components to it. We have a TIF district at the airport, it's all industrial, it doesn't produce any school-age children, but certainly the downtown TIF does. And potentially with these other TIF districts, if they come to fruition, they may do that. And this allows us in this statute to create those agreements, and that's something that we should be very closely looking at when we move to those. The other thing too I will say is the airport TIF district is actually moving along quite well. We have 2 buildings under construction right now that it looks like are going to come on the tax rolls in 2024. It's what's on the ground on April 1st of each year is what's taxed. And the steel already up, foundations are up, steel is up on those. Then they're going to take a big chunk of that bond payment for that industrial park that the city built, the roadway and the infrastructure there. And there's a very large building that's also being proposed in that different district. Once that is constructed, that will more than pay for the bond, and I'm going to propose to eliminate that TIF district. Or at the very least, the excess funds go back to the school district, even though it doesn't produce any school-age children, that we make that arrangement under this provision here to pay the school district back. That building is supposed to be built in the next 5 years, and it is a very, very large building. So that will help ease some of the tax impact that we're facing here. So that's an important one. It's going to be close in front of us here. And we also need to take a look at the downtown TIF district. And Right now, the city does not have any particular plans. We're paying off a bond for the tunnel project, and we're working on the downtown parking lots. But depending upon what occurs with that, there's quite a bit of TIF that's generated that goes into the TIF fund right now. And we should be looking at this concept that I discussed with the superintendent of paying the school district for kids that have been new children that have come into the district because of new development that's been built there. And we have some projects that are approved and will be underway soon. So that, I think, can help you offset some of this impact that you're feeling in the tax rate with your budgets. Any other general questions I can answer about this?
Can you just briefly explain to us in layman's terms what TIF
Sure.
is?
So let's take an easier one. The airport one. That is city-owned land, so it has 0 tax value. Anything that's added on there becomes increment and goes into the TIF district. So keep that in mind. Let's take the downtown TIF. So when the downtown TIF was created, there was a certain taxable amount of properties in there. That tax goes to the city, the county, and the school, as it always has. Any new buildings, any new increment, any new increase in value, like with the revaluation, all that increment, all that change goes into the TIF district.
Goes into a fund?
Yes, for the TIF district.
Okay.
So the school's portion, this is the local education tax, the statewide education property tax, and the county tax and the municipal tax, all go into that fund.
And that fund is only used for development in that
District.
as opposed to going to a general fund which can be used across the city.
Right.
I see.
Yep.
Okay.
What's the lifetime? How long?
It's as long as the council wishes to keep it. It doesn't have a lifespan. Generally what happens is you have bonds to do certain things, and once the end of those bonds are done, usually you discontinue your TIF district. Londonderry has an example of that Pettingill Road project. They built an industrial park by the airport, and they pay for that with TIF. And then they actually closed it down early. They were able to pay it off early, which we're probably going to be able to do at the airport here soon. So they don't have a lifespan.
And so then once they dissolve the TIF, those funds can be used across the city?
Well, they're taxed like every other building
Right.
across the city, yes.
So if I'm understanding, and I might not be understanding because that's entirely possible, but if I'm understanding, what you're suggesting is potentially at some point in the future, then sort of changing the way that we're managing the funds in the downtown TIF district, and including making allowances for kids that might have moved in because of developments that are happening there.
That's
And
what I think we should do.
And we can do, but if we did that, we can do that retroactively?
It would be going forward.
But I mean, we can change the agreement. That's my
Yes.
question, not retroactive. We can change the agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
We just did that. The plan for the airport is we added a road we're building, for this new building that's there, and it's going to be paid for with TIF funds. So there's a whole process to change the TIF plan.
Okay.
Just because I think this is the way it should be
Right.
doesn't mean the council's going to agree
Sure.
with that. But,
That's
but
fine.
I've made this quite clear several different times that this is what we need to be looking at doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we're really doing is we're shortchanging the rest of the tax base. It's wise to use these funds to create development, which creates additional increment in additional tax base. But if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, I'm not sure that really achieves the objective. And with the tax rate increases that we're seeing both on the school side and the city side, that's one way to offset that. Ideally, you don't want to be creating a TIF where it's building up a fund.
Right.
You want to use it to pay off bonds and operating expenses.
MJ and then Jessica.
So like I said, I'm having a little trouble understanding. I get that you have a frozen tax base when you create the TIF district, but how does that impact the school when we raise our tax rate for the year? Is the TIF district then keeping, if our rate was $12 per thousand when you created the district and now we're at $24 per thousand, are you saying you're keeping that incremental of the school portion as well in the TIF district, or is that outside that?
We get the money that would normally go to the school district now goes to the TIF fund, and the SWEP funds also go to the TIF fund.
And that is currently happening in the downtown district?
It is.
So how much does that impact, like, our budget what we have to raise?
Quite a bit, especially with the change that we had with the revaluation. most recent reevaluation. We have another one coming up in '25.
So that's why it pushes, the tax rate is going, it's being felt more by residential.
Than by commercial.
So by giving money back to the school districts, it helps to offset that impact, is what you're.
Right, so if I'm paying you directly out of TIF funds, that's less money you gotta raise in taxes. Because I'm taking that tax increment that's in that district that I don't need, I'm not using, and I'm giving it back to you, especially if you've got, let's say it creates 10 additional kids as an apartment building that's built over there. And we can show, we know the kids
Right.
live, you do. And the superintendent tells me, okay, I've got 10 kids that started school on September 1st, and the cost is $25,000 per student, and then we
Yeah.
make that check out of the TIF funds to pay you.
Sorry, Jessica. go ahead.
I guess the part, and this is something I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around conceptually, is that it doesn't, student costs to the district don't really work that way, though. We don't add a student to the schools and suddenly our costs go up $25,000. That isn't how it works. And also, our overall enrollment hasn't been increasing, and our costs haven't been going up because of more students. Our costs have been going up because of healthcare costs and salary costs and other things that are not correlated with student enrollment. And so I guess I'm still trying to, I'm not saying it's a little tangential to this question, but I guess that part of the logic around a lot of these conversations is eluding me a little bit, because we talk about it like, oh, new students are a bad thing, but I guess it's not really clear to me that that they're a bad thing in the sense that they increase our costs when more students come into the town, but that isn't really how it works. I mean, at some point it is, like if you have enough of an increase and you have to add teachers and you have to add square footage and whatever, but we aren't in that position in this district. We have flexibility in terms of, we've just been looking at increasing class sizes and stuff, so it's a little bit.
But I think that the thing is if we were getting the full tax rate on that property, there would be more money flowing into our general, so like one way to account for that is to think about it per student. You know, like, so if we're able to tax that property at its true value and we're able to get our rate, regardless of the number of students in there, we'd have more money flowing in if it wasn't a TIF.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like what you're saying is that, so when we figure out the tax rate impact, we take the increase in taxes we need and we divide it by the denominator of our assessed value that the DRA gives us. Sounds like our assessed value, the denominator would be bigger if we didn't have all these,
TIF districts.
a couple of these TIF districts. So it kind of spread the cost more. I think I'm not an expert, but I
That's
think what you're
precisely it.
saying.
You'd be spreading the cost over a larger tax base. Your tax base is smaller than the city's tax base because we had the TIF district.
Ah,
So you're
okay.
losing that money that
Got
you
it.
would normally otherwise get.
It's always the denominator. Sorry.
So instead of the school district's tax rate being up here, it's gonna be down here a little bit less.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
should be good for you and for me, everybody else who lives here.
Right.
So one easy way to figure out an amount to give to the school is to think about it per student. I think
I think it's just, as we have these discussions, and it's sort of coming up, like, as we collaborate with the city and we look to sort of, I think, increase our collaboration with the city, I think it's been a part of the discussion that's been not quite making sense to me, is that way of talking about development as adding, and sort of like, how many kids are gonna live in this potential development in this TIF district or whatever, or wherever they are. Like, that's a piece that hasn't quite made sense to me, because that isn't actually how enrollment works according to our costs.
But that makes sense.
But, thank you.
I think one of the arguments Sean is making, I'm not speaking to, I don't mean to speak for Sean, but, so the airport one, where there's no people living, the argument can be made that that doesn't affect the district at all, so that's why it's excluded. But if you have a district where kids are living, we are providing services and we should get a piece of that pie. I guess that's the argument I'm
Yes,
thinking in my head.
Yes, that makes, thank you. This is all, it's all coming together very nicely.
But the airport one is revenue that you would normally get if it wasn't in a TIF district, and that's why I want to get rid of that TIF district as soon as I can. Once it pays off its bill for building the road and the infrastructure, that's going to help you, because that's going to have a larger tax base for the local school education tax.
So people who are in those districts, do they see that allocated out to the TIF district, like the amount they're paying, the line item? Does it say this portion goes, or does it still, because they're still paying the same amount of taxes?
Yes.
They don't see any
Correct.
and the rest goes where it was frozen, right? So do they see that allocation?
No.
They don't.
No.
And so there's money there that says it's going to the schools, but it doesn't make it.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And why is it that the school, so you, if I heard you right, you said that the city still gets your portion. Why is it the school?
No, we don't get our portion
No.
either.
Okay.
So
Nobody
it goes to
does.
the TIF fund, so I can't use it for fire and police
Yeah.
protection, all those other things.
Got it.
That's another reason why it benefits me too. so
Get
that I
rid of
can-
it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, as soon as
Yeah.
you can. It has a purpose, and it really, I'm concerned about abuses of TIF districts. People create them all over the place. That's not what they're for. They're for a specific purpose to create revitalization in a certain area. And once that's done, or building an industrial park, it's achieved, the idea is to get rid of the TIF district and let the funds go back to where they're supposed to normally go. Because it's done, it's already paid for that infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions on this? This is just one of the things he's going to talk to us about today, so, all right.
This was helpful.
This was really helpful, yes. Thank you. So you can proceed. However you want to proceed.
I guess the one question I have is what is the school district's role when you're looking to create these TIF districts? I don't know that we've ever
We've never
voiced
talked about
any
it.
kind of so we have zero input into,
No.
other than coming to a public hearing and saying hey, we can't lose any more money.
I would highly suggest that we work more closely, like I'm doing with the superintendent, that the school is much more of a partner in it than just being notified that you can show up and say something. Because in fairness to the school board, I don't think they really understood this. And for that matter, the city was brand new when we created the first one.
Yeah.
But I think this requires a lot more collaboration, and that's why I'm the one leaning forward and suggesting we look at this methodology, that we help, because it's affecting everybody.
Right.
And to a certain degree, it can be counterproductive if we're not careful. And I'm interested in helping you reduce that tax rate that you've got.
Right.
So it's in everybody's best interest to work together on this. So I'm suggesting a much more collaborative, a more a vocal presence by the school board, and I'll work with you to do that to help advocate for some of these ideas.
I'm sorry, I want to follow up on that just a little bit. Can you help me understand what's the other side of this? What's the, if this, you sort of mentioned, well, the city council may not, this is something I'm proposing, what's the downside? Sort of what's the opposition to this way of doing things?
Well, we get to keep all the money for ourselves, I suppose. Which, right now, the TIF money in the downtown it's growing. I bring in about $700,000 a year, and I think the bond is $275,000. And right now, there are no plans to do anything with the money. So it's sitting there when it could be being used to reduce taxes now. And then if we figure out we're going to do something, then we can obviously charge that to the bond in the future. But meanwhile, that money would be going to reduce taxes right now. So that's the downside by just letting it grow in there.
No, sorry. I'm saying if we the sort of change in the methodology that you're proposing, and proposing sort of a more active role from the school board, and saying, who would oppose that?
I don't think anybody would oppose that, because I think, again, at the beginning of this process, the players really, I don't think, understood what their roles or what they could be and how they're involved in this. And TIF is not, it's used across the state, but it's not really active, and most people are only using it for industrial parks. They're not using it for general purpose areas. There's a few cities that are, but Manchester doesn't even have them. Most of them aren't doing that. So this is a little bit of an odd situation in New Hampshire. There's not a whole lot of experience with this. In a lot of places, the school board and the city don't get along, and they don't talk to each other. We're a little bit different here, because we have a relationship. So that's why I'm saying this is an opportunity for us to work more closely together, and I think help each other.
Did we tell you about the boiler that we need at the
No, I know about the boiler.
Speaking of working together.
Thank you.
And interesting enough, if it was in a TIF district, we could actually fund that.
Because it's revitalizing, right?
Well, it's part of that infrastructure in
Yeah.
that area.
Yes.
It has to be spent in that area. And that's why paying the school district money, because I'd be paying for kids that are actually in that district, in that TIF district.
Can we, roll it in because we've got the fire department?
It's a little more complicated than that. Slightly. Go ahead.
Anyway.
So I think Rand case was the next thing you
Yeah.
had?
Yeah.
All right. So I sent in a memo on that, and I provided you with the the pleadings on that. I'm not sure where you are in terms of your level of understanding about, I know you're part of the Conval case, and the city is part of the Education Coalition Communities and the RAND case, which are two quite different things. I don't know what level you're.
High-level overview.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Conval, I think you know enough about
We
that.
know
I won't
about
talk
Conval.
about that. RAND involves the issue of SWEPT, in particular the issue of excess SWEPT. So in our case, we bring in $3.9 million a year in SWEPT, statewide education property tax, and it doesn't go anywhere. People have this misunderstanding. They think it goes to Concord. It stays right in the municipalities where it's raised, and it has been since 2010 or 11 when they used to have donor towns. So that money stays here. And if the cost of an adequate education was $3,636 per student, something like that. And as you know, in the Conval case, it's now $7,300, I forget what the number is. Got it in there somewhere. But right now, we're allowed to, excess SWEPT is if you have the number of students times that number, and if you have more students beyond that, the amount of money you bring in SWEPT, theoretically that money is available for other communities, although that's not what happens right now. So right now you get adequacy aid because you have more students. We're not bringing enough SWEPT money. We would be a receiver town under the scenario right now, the way it is. So we would get money from other communities. The idea is that the poorer towns that have a very low tax base, the Claremonts, the Allenstowns, the Franklins, the Berlins, would receive money from these donor towns. There's like 27 of them. And they produce right now, according to DRA's estimate, about $26 million in FY25, $29 million. Now, in order to get an adequate education, I think the cost is now $541 under the Conval case. So as you can see, that's a far cry, that amount that's being raised in excess SWEPT, that excess money that those communities are keeping. Remember, these are property taxes that are raised in these communities that stay there. And whatever you bring in SWEPT is offsets to your local property tax. If you didn't have SWEPT, your local property tax would go higher. If you're a donor community and you have to take that SWEPT that you're now using to offset your local education cost, and you have to send that to Concord, you're going to have to raise it twice. You're going to have to raise it and send that amount to Concord, but you have to raise the same amount because you're going to have to, your own operating budget has to be maintained. So that would add significant cost increase to those communities in that situation. So there's 27 communities right now that would produce excess SWEPT under the scenario of $3,636, whatever the number is, from adequate education, so-called. I put that in parentheses because I don't think too many people think that that's an adequate education. In order to get to the number of the 7,300 and whatever it is that the Conval case said, that's like 541 million. So that means a number of things have to occur. Either SWEPT, the rate has to increase, the amount of donor communities has to significantly increase, and the concern I have for us in particular is we have a very fast growing assessed valuation in our city. And we have the highest housing cost in the state in terms of the value of our properties, and they keep growing. So my concern is that we fit into that category of donor community. And if that is the case, we're going to be sending property taxpayer dollars from the city to Concord, which will be redistributed to other communities. And that I don't think we want, because then we have to make that same amount up again to be able to meet our own educational needs. That's the concern with that. So the position of the Education Coalition Committee is that the way to solve the education funding issue is not property taxes. It's other sources of revenue that they need to look at. And there's other ways they can do that. Interest and dividends tax, business profits tax, business enterprise tax, which they are lowering right now. The legislature has lowered. So this is not the means by which to do that, putting that burden further on taxpayers, because it's a regressive system that is not fair. In some of these so-called property-rich towns, not everybody is rich, so they'd be paying the burden. They would be sending their property tax dollars to the state that gets redistributed to other communities. That's our argument. We don't represent any of these negative tax rate towns. They're not part of the coalition. We don't dispute we don't disagree at all with Conval in in terms of the cost of an adequate education. We're not trying to determine that. And we sort of, you know, when we found out they were talking about $7,363 or whatever it is, we all know that it costs a lot more than that. So we don't take any, we don't have no position. Our position is very, very narrow, that property taxes should stay in the communities that they're raised in. And the state needs to find other revenue sources to pay for adequacy aid. That's the quick and down and dirty.
When you're a donor town, do you send all of the SWEP money to the state, or do you send just sort of the excess SWEP money?
When there were donor towns, before they changed the law, because there was a lawsuit on that, they were sending the excess to the state.
Right.
But there's also bills to send all of it to the state, and then the state to redistribute it. So that's also concerning.
If you ask the state about their education trust fund, they include as part of the, it's a part, I should provide you, I can provide you a pie chart maybe next meeting. There's a pie chart with different segments of it that fund this fund. It has $300 and something billion in it, including the tobacco settlement and Volkswagen fund. And the biggest piece of that pie is this swept. They consider that state revenue, even though the money never leaves City Hall. It goes from your pocket to City Hall to us. So that, the state already considers that state aid, but since 2011, no matter, they tell you what the rate is, $1.22, $1.50, whatever DRA tells you it is for the swept, whatever that gets raised, that stays in Lebanon, and then it's compared against what an adequate education is, and they either give you money or you don't get any money. Basically, if you make more than you're supposed to get, you just don't get any more money. Back in the old days, they actually, if you're supposed to get $4 million and you raise $5 million, you're sending the million to Concord.
So your Lebanon, the city of Lebanon is part of this case because you anticipate, we don't currently have excess.
Correct.
SWEP
Correct.
money, but you feel like we're on this bubble where we could all of a sudden go from a receiving town to a donor town, whatever label they might give that.
So a couple years ago, the scenario was that that's exactly, there was a study that was done by them that we would fit into that category. Since then, our values have gone up considerably, and now the amount is a lot more that has to be raised because
Right.
the cost of an adequate education, of course, the Supreme Court's going to ultimately decide on that, but it's going to be a much bigger number. So the 27 towns are not going to be anywhere near enough. It's going to take a lot more towns to make up the excess amount that's necessary to be able to distribute to other towns that are property poor. And our argument is that property taxes is not the way to solve this problem. Find another solution, and there are other solutions.
And one other question, I think when I was reading through this, what was confusing to me is it appeared as if the excess funds by some communities, they're using it for municipal budgets in
Yes.
addition to school budgets. Is that true?
Yeah, so you have negative property tax rate communities. Hart's location, they're the communities with like 12 people in it.
Yep.
And in fact, there's a bill that was heard today, 1686, and here's what it says in it, in the new language. And I was looking at it today, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Any funds remaining after full payment of the excess tax required in paragraph 1 shall become available for unrestricted use by the municipality. Right.
Yeah, that makes zero, I mean, if it's an educational fund, why
Right.
wouldn't it automatically go back?
Educational tax.
Right.
Sure. But in those cases, they might have 1 or 2 school children.
Right.
So they
So
may,
they're fully funded, they have no reason for that money.
Kevin and
I think that's the
and
intent.
Jessica.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Again, let me summarize here, make sure it makes sense. So basically, Conval is saying $7,500. And so this would take the pool of SWEP funds, give it to the state, they would redistribute per each student, right, to each municipality. So,
On some sort of formula.
yeah, so like a student who grows up in sort of a poor district, this guarantees them $7,500 worth of education. So, and you're not arguing that that shouldn't be the case. You're just arguing they should do it with different funds.
Yeah, I'm arguing they shouldn't take property taxpayer dollars from one community. They should stay in that community. They should not be sent to the state and redistributed to some other community. That's our argument, not property taxes. But my concern is, Once you send this money to the state, it's up to those people at the legislatures how it's going to be spent, what that formula is going to be, and all those sorts of things. That's what worries me in light of what we've already seen down there and how they're using some of the education trust fund money, vouchers and things of that nature. So we will lose control of property taxpayer dollars. If they're raising interest and dividend money, or they're raising business profits tax money, it's up to them how they're going to spend that money. But when you're talking about people's property tax dollars, because normally you make these decisions, the citizens who live here and their elected officials at the local level decide how that money's spent. Now, that money is going to be decided by people in Concord how it's going to be spent.
We can't set that rate such that we just take the number of students in our district, we multiply it by 7,500, and that's our rate. There's no way to do this. It's that the swept rate is set by the state.
Correct.
Jessica?
So in the letter that you sent, which is here in our packet, one of the items that you had here was the impact of the court's injunction and the subsequent motions filed by coalition communities can be considered in several aspects. And the second item is educational funding. Schools in Lebanon could be affected if the city is required to remit excess swept funds without receiving additional state funding for education. This might lead to budget cuts in local schools, potentially affecting educational programs and maintenance of school facilities. I'm still struggling to understand how, can you explain to me how that would happen?
So let me use this example. Right now, we generate $3.9 million in swept, right? So that money is revenue that comes to the school district that you don't have to raise in the local property tax portion.
And where does that come to the schools, Tim? Like, is that,
I'm sorry.
How does that
Just
get?
trying to get ready for my presentation. Go ahead.
Sorry, sorry to loop you back. But like, we say that comes to the schools.
Yes, in your budget book, in the revenue sheet, you'll see two lines from the state. One is adequacy grant and one is swept.
Okay.
And those are, and, you know, I'm given an estimate in November 1st from the state.
It's built into our budget
Right,
already.
so when you, on a $53 million budget that we're raising $38 million, that assumes $14 million in other revenue sources, including tuition. The bigger ones are tuition and the state stuff.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. And so basically the argument here is that if, that money would go away, our revenues would be lower.
Well, let's just say that out of the $3.9 million that we raised in swept, let's say we had to give half of it to the state. So you're going to have to raise that other $1.7 million again.
Well, that's the thing. We don't have to. Like, I guess that feels like I'm not quite understanding that statement. Like, we don't have to raise that money again. We just have to not spend it.
Well, right now, you're going to make a decision in March on this budget. These folks are going to, this bill, if it becomes law, will become probably law in July. So if they say that is the case, what's going to happen is you've already set your tax rate, and you're expecting that 3.9 or some odd $1 million in swept. And if you don't get that now, local property taxes have to go up to meet that difference. So if we send $1.7 million to the state, we're going to have to raise $1.7 million on the local education side to make up that difference, because your budget's already set.
How does the timing of that work? I guess that's one of the things I'm struggling with a little bit.
We're talking about a budget now using these projections for next year from the state.
Right.
So when we say the taxes are going to go up $1.45 or $1.37, what it may be, that's based on these projections. But he's right, if they change the law between now and then the estimate I got from the state for our swept or adequacy aid, well, could be zero or could be whatever it is, and that they set the taxes for this budget in November. So we passed the budget.
Okay.
I filed last year's stuff, says how much money we have left. I talked to DRA, and they say, based on actual revenues you're going to get this fall, which would then now be a zero, this is what your tax rate is. And so maybe it's $2.50 higher, and everybody's like, wait, you said it'd be $1.37.
Okay.
And nobody's happy.
Understood.
That's part of the pleadings that we have, and if you looked at it, and that's the very concern that we have. People are making decisions right now, especially in those who know they're already producing excess swept. It's like, well, if we're going to build a new school this year, but we don't know if we're going to be doubling our tax rate. So that's causing some serious problems. We're in a better, right now, as it looks right now, we would be a receiver town, not a donor town. But again, I don't know what's going to happen with the legislation and what's going to happen with the Supreme Court decision. No.
Not that this is better, but I suppose if they were going to do something, they could make it effective, like late enough that you could get adequate numbers next year.
Yeah, DRA said that in here in the fiscal note, that this is going to cause this very problem we're talking about, and they suggested there be some amendments made to the bill. I don't know what happened today at the hearing at 2 o'clock. I mean, gotten a brief yet from our lobbyist, but I'll find out tomorrow, hopefully.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Jessica might have a question.
So the city is party to this lawsuit. Who makes that decision
Who makes what decision?
to participate in the lawsuit?
It was the city council. The presentation was made
So
to
the
them.
city council votes to participate?
No, they don't. I make the decision. I'm the
Okay.
chief executive officer of the city, but we made a presentation in front of them, and we made the decision.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were part of that process.
Okay, thank you.
So what was, the group that is sort of part of this lawsuit are cities versus school districts?
Right.
Or are there, because of the property tax?
Right, because we're the ones who collect it.
Okay. And, sorry, no,
Because technically, you don't have any standing,
Yeah.
because you're not, I'm the one who has to collect the SWEP.
Okay.
And I'm the one who has to remit it to the state.
Right.
The Portsmouth School District is part of it, but they're part of the city. So they've been going to our meetings, so.
So if you were to become party to this kind of lawsuit, again, this might be another area that it would be great to have
Yes.
collaboration and conversation around it, because we each sort of grabbed onto, I mean, I think we're
all working
moving
towards
in the
the
right
same thing,
direction and all feeling similar. But this would be another opportunity for us to collaborate and have discussions around to make sure that we're all understanding these things.
And we did do that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think we did.
We did.
Yeah.
We did talk a little bit about it. But I think also, in addition to that, so these are various court cases that we're part of, but at another hearing today was another proposal to raise student adequacy aid to $10,000 per person through legislative things, which didn't really talk about how they wanted to raise those funds, right? So there's like 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 different ways that people are attempting to change the formula or the tax rate or whatever it is that we do to create more money for students. So it would help us all to be more involved in all of those hearings and all of those cases.
And what I'll do is I'll just keep pushing information to the superintendent, and she can feed it up to you folks,
Yeah.
and I can meet with you whenever you ask me to come before you, as always.
Any other final words? So we want to thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it, and for providing all the materials. That was very helpful, and we appreciate you explaining it to us like we don't understand, because it helps us.
Both of them are very complicated issues,
Yes.
quite frankly. So. You folks have a good night. Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you.
just also wanted to say thank you for continuing to support our crossing guards.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we did want to say that. Thank you very much.
Bill, do you want any sort of discussion about the Conval lawsuit or not, or do you guys know?
I think we're good.
That's good.
If we have more questions, we'll bring it up later, but I think we're okay.
But Lil,
Yes.
I have a question.
I'm sure you do, but we'll save them. Save them. Okay, so we are we're going to go on to the SAU leadership team updates.
Sure, I'd like to start with the plane build. So included was our letter of notification from New Hampshire Aviation Museum that Lebanon High School was chosen for the 24 plane build and ongoing for the next 5 years. So we're really excited for this opportunity. We are, within the next couple weeks, we will get information out to start recruiting our students. We hope to have a maximum of 15 students per year participating in this. There is another local district, Kearsarge, that was not chosen, and the Aviation Museum asked if we did not meet our quota of students, if we could potentially collaborate with them and they could send students. So I said, I think we're going to get our 15, but we'd certainly be open to those conversations. I wanted to thank Bonnie and the team at the high school, the community members, our community partners, Lil, who came, and we put on, I think, a great presentation that really made a strong application for that. So we're going to be busy cleaning our 3-bay garage out where that plane bill will happen. So I anticipate next year we'll do a lot of updates and really make it a strategy for communication to really celebrate this opportunity for Lebanon High School students.
questions about that?
We had a flood in that 3-bay a couple years ago, so hopefully that's all solved.
Don't tell me that.
It's been great this last
Yes.
flooding part right now, so it
Exactly.
should be
There might
okay.
be some empty space up at the airport. A hangar or two.
We actually will need hangar space when it's nearing completion, so we have reached out to our partners at the airport as well. So, and if you know anybody that's currently in aviation or is interested in mentoring, we'll be looking out for mentors too to come and work with our students.
Yeah, that's actually a good point for the community. You don't have to actually know anything about aviation, but if you're interested in engineering or project design or project management or anything you want to work with high school students, they can use mentors in all different sorts of fields, and it's run through this Tango flight. So all the mentors have to do is help the students accomplish the things that they are instructed to do.
I know that we have, I have a cousin who is a pilot. His son is currently at FIT. There's also another that is a Lebanon graduate. So do we touch back in with some of those current alumni?
Absolutely.
And see if they want to do stuff?
Yep, absolutely. That would be terrific. So,
And some of the mentors you don't have to be there every day. You can be there for part of the time. I mean, it's very flexible, so we can work it out in lots of different ways.
Because I know there's a freshman and sophomore at FIT who are both pilots.
wonderful.
So did you say it's a 5-year program?
Yeah, so they'll be building planes and then selling them and then keep continuing. They're guaranteed 5 years for us, so.
1 plane per year?
Yes, that is the target construction piece. So the other thing I'd like to offer in the next few weeks, we'll be invited to go to Manchester School of Technology where the plane build is going on currently. So if any board members want to go down and check it out, we can do a road trip down to the school.
Take the 15-passenger van?
Absolutely.
As long as it's not needed for skiing.
Yes, one of you guys drive.
No, they're skiing. They're doing it.
So thank you. Then the other thing I included was draft goals for the year. So I have created 4 goals that I'd like to focus on, and you have them. One of them being in the area of recruiting, retaining, and developing high-quality staff. As we bring in the Director of Human Resources, I'm hoping to be able to provide and share data on staff retention so we can really look at job satisfaction, strengthening our new teacher apprentice program. We have currently, I believe, 10 or 11 people enrolled in that program, which is wonderful. Enhancing recognition programs for our teachers. The next goal is enhancing a district-wide communication. As you know, a survey has gone out. Probably in the first February meeting, you will see a summary of those results and the next steps in the action plan. I am also hoping to create an RFP within this review for a new website, which would be included in this 25-26 school year budget. And then conduct some training sessions for staff on effective communication practices. One of the things I was just reviewing from the survey, a lot of parents are saying they'd love training on ALMA about how to follow the progress, their students' progress on ALMA. So there's lots of areas that we can provide information and training on. Third goal, promote 21st century learning opportunities, so creating innovative experiences, including the Take Flight program and project-based learning. Karen DuBois is included in our title grant to start training our staff in project-based learning, so we will be putting together an implementation plan to start for middle and high school staff to enhance teaching opportunities, and then adopting innovative curriculum, so hopefully we will have selected and piloted an ELA curriculum for K-4. And final goal is develop a map for our strategic plan. I know we've talked in the 6 months I've been here about the strategic plan, and so identifying the strengths and weaknesses in the current plan, getting feedback from stakeholders. We'll provide our district team, we'll provide feedback to the school board in June of the status of our current plan, and then we'll create the next steps to bring us that new plan from, I'm hoping 2025 to 2030. I would love feedback, or if there's any additional areas that we would like to focus on.
So later in the meeting, we're going to talk about the superintendent evaluation process. This is part of that process, and normally when we're on a year schedule, January to December, we would have decided these goals in December in consultation with the superintendent, but because it was her first 6 months, we gave the first 6 months, and so these are the goals for the going forward, so that'll be a part of our discussion in a minute, but we want to give you all the goals and have you all weigh in on if we can add to this if we want, we can amend these if we'd like. It's sort of just give feedback to Amy about what it is that we think about these goals. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say? Good, or, can just be you agree with them. I mean, I personally, I like all of them. I particularly like the number one right now, just because having gone to a bunch of these seminars about the legislative climate in Concord right now, it is increasingly, looks like it's moving in the direction of increasingly chilling for teachers. And so I think it's going to become harder and harder and harder for us to recruit and maintain quality staff. So I think it's great that that is one of the goals. I like all the goals. I just, that today is more poignant than others.
So I guess, I've been very vocal. I do not like our website, but I think that the communication section I really appreciate, because again, at least 2 to 3 times a week, I go to the various websites and I find nothing but outdated information and more questions than answers. And I think that it's very helpful and should be the first place a parent is able to look for information, and probably would also free up a lot of other resources and time for teachers in the school to kind of have that current. So I applaud that effort.
So I guess what I'm thinking about, not that you need another goal, I like the goals that are here, but I also would love for you to think about, when you think about best practices in your role as a superintendent, is there a goal for you professionally around your own professional growth that the board can support?
Sure. I was looking at super eval, so potentially for the next meeting, I can come back for that too. So I have some areas.
Perfect. Any other? Go ahead, Steve.
I just like the idea that you've got a short list of actionable things that are probably all accomplishable within some time period. So it seems well thought out. Kudos to you.
Anything else? Okay. So we'll use this when we talk later about the superintendent evaluation process, and as we go forward for the rest of the year, we'll, once we get a revised professional practice goal. I think also, too, and we've talked about this when we talked about our goal setting, goals in the district are tricky because we have superintendent goals, we have school board goals, we have school district goals, all of which are in some ways synergistic. They can't happen without each other. So sometimes we say this is a Amy goal and this is a board goal, and really we all end up doing a lot of the work together, and I think that's, for some of these, that will be the case as well. So, all right, let's move on to business administrator update.
I included in your packet an update through December. It's similar to the last time. I point out that we're 90.62% expended through December. I try to compare to last year, but sometimes I don't do the same month, so I guess I didn't do December last year. But it's similar to, I think last January we were 91% expended, so a little more expended. Let's see what it's like in January. My point is we're a little more expended than last year, but I feel that we're doing okay. We're not overly expended. Some things that have caused some money to be moved around, and some other things, if you're looking at some of those adjustments. Historically, up until the budget you just approved, we've carried money for speech and language pathologists in the budget at the middle school, at every level, but the middle school and high school in particular has been vacant for years, and so that goes into salaries, and then I move it to a different location when we buy services instead. And the budget we're approving, we moved it, we started right there. So things like that, the carpet at Mount Leb, that's at $14,800 in transport and maintenance. And really just, you can see that the overall adjustments at zero because it's moving money around if salaries don't line up with what I thought they were going to. We hired 5 new paras at least since the last budget time. So all in all, I'm satisfied that we're on a good track. I guess I asked for your questions. If I don't know them, I'll find out and come back to you.
So yesterday, there was a Facebook post on our debt, our food debt. So can you just sort of speak to how we're doing sort of generally? It did, I mean, everybody that seemed to post comments on that post want to support our schools and our debt and stuff like that. I know that we've talked in the past, sometimes that's tricky, sometimes it's welcomed. Sort of, can you speak to?
I can. Talked briefly to Shaylee about this today, and she's like, right before I left, bam, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So I did see that post, and I really appreciated actually what Ricky put on there, because what Ricky Marsh, who's our food service director, wrote on there is exactly right. And I did see, obviously, that there was good intentions on there, but people were getting a little off kilter a little bit. So if you come through our lunch lines and we give you food, we give you a reimbursable meal. If you are a paid student, you put your code in. If you're a paid student and you have balance, it does it all automatically. If you're out of money or if you don't have money, you get the food. And so nobody goes without food. Now you don't, at the high school level and the middle school level, we have more choice. We can buy more than just the reimbursable meal. We do try to say you can't get the extra cheeseburger or whatever because you don't have money in your account. But the reimbursable meal, which is the food group stuff that the USDA has determined, breakfast and lunch you go through. For the record, if you're reduced breakfast in New Hampshire pays all breakfast for free and reduced in New Hampshire are free. That's a New Hampshire thing. So we do have some, obviously we try to collect on it because we don't do any sort of you turning away. It's a little higher than it would be if you were running a business and you're like, sorry, you don't have any money, you can't get any food. And I mentioned before that it's not too bad. Right now we're $7,114 across the district, which is, historically in my 10 years here, we usually end somewhere around 4 to 6, so we're a little higher. We are a little higher, but not crazy. I would say that the usefulness of donations is this way. So at the end of the year, whatever the food service fund, if it's black, in the black, meaning we brought in more revenue than we spent on not just food, but also equipment and salaries. If it's in the black, we're good. If it's in the red, meaning we spent more, then the general fund must make that whole. And the budget you're approving now, I'm carrying $50,000, assuming it's in the red. First 7 or 8 years, actually up until COVID, that I was here at least, we were in the black every year. We have been up and down. 2 out of the last 3 years, we've been in the red. So a donation takes away some of that bad debt, therefore reducing how much in the red that fund is. So donations do help. They help the taxpayers. Because every student gets food if they ask for it, you're wiping away individual accounts, but really it helps the taxpayers, because whatever's not wiped away at the end of the year, you guys wipe away. So that's how a donation works. So hope that helps. Ricky is exactly
Our principal
right.
had reached out, was able to get to the person who posted just to see if there's anything we could do to assist, and that person actually saw that tag and post on I Got You Upper Valley, and it was an anonymous post, so we're not sure who put that anonymous post on there, but that was shared, and she thought she was doing something good and didn't understand. And Leah explained to Sam that no kid is denied food.
I would say, I think he said he got 15 emails today, so
Yeah, I
maybe
think
it did do good.
It definitely seemed like our community is wanting to help make sure that kids are fed in our district, which is amazing. So I think if we just have a way for people who are wanting to help in that specific area, and we welcome that, I think it's a positive thing.
And
There was a donation to Mount Leb a few weeks ago for $1,500
Yeah.
that someone just made. So we're always taking anonymous donations, or you don't have to be anonymous, but.
Yeah.
I think it's good, I mean, you made this clarification, and Ricky also made this clarification, that this is also not, we're not giving people sun butter sandwiches and that's all you get, that it is the hot lunch that everyone else has, and there's no stigma attached to it, and I think that was unclear as well for
And
people.
can you also,
so.
because I think the other thing that came up in the post that I know that we've talked about is why we're not participating in the state free lunch.
Why our state is not participating.
Well, I think that there, like, school districts could apply to, but we don't meet the threshold
Right.
to get.
I mean, it's been a couple of years now, but there was some thresholds you had to meet that we didn't meet. I have to refresh my memory on that. It's been 2 years since that program went away.
Are you talking about the federal program?
Yeah, there's
Right.
some
That we're
program
not
that
participating in? Yeah.
that you had to have a certain percentage of your student body eligible for free and reduced, and then you could get grant funds to provide meals for everyone. And I think we didn't meet that.
Yeah.
Is why we didn't seek those funds.
And
I should also remember that, want to point out that anybody who is free and reduced eligible, meaning the most needy in our community, they're not part of this bad debt. Like, that money is paid for. So the outstanding balances are by people who don't qualify and
or haven't filed the paperwork.
haven't filed the paperwork.
Right.
So.
But that doesn't mean that.
Doesn't mean you have lots of money. It is very concrete. If you make this, you qualify. You make $1 more, you don't.
Right.
And that's my beef with the federal
Right.
legislation. It's like one size fits all across the whole nation.
Right.
Well, and also, so surrounding states of Vermont, Maine have made it universal, and their states have voted for that at their state legislature. It was up again just recently, and our legislature voted it down again. So this has not been something that our state is supporting, which is also unclear to people, I think. It's just sort of like, why are we not doing this? Well, we're not allowed, so we can only do so much.
It is the food service fund is roughly $800,000 a year. It's not a small chunk of change. So that's the kind of money you were talking about. It's,
To provide.
if you wanted to provide free meals, if you take out the revenue that people pay from the federal government, it's multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably about $250,000.
Any other questions for Tim about this report? Okay, so we'll go on to your next.
So I included in your packet the default budget, and this is just a form it goes on. So later in the action, I would want you to take a motion to accept the default. And then I included the warrants, and there's a lot to talk about on the warrants, or the warrant. It's warrant articles, one warrant. So Article 1 is the election, that just goes on there. That's the election officials, and if you think I did something wrong there, then let me know. I'm always looking for that. But I checked with Diane, and I think that this is right. Now, the operating budget, the total gross budget, which is the general fund that we debate, the food service fund I just talked about, and the grant fund. Those two funds are funded other ways, but the taxpayers give you authority to spend all the money of the district. So that's what that $55 million is. So what you guys need to be aware of is I send this to our lawyers and I send it to the DRA, and they don't like something, they're like, you can't do that. So I was incorrect. I did not understand the law, or didn't know the law. We cannot put money directly in the cap reserve fund through the budget, which I still can't believe that's true, but I got it from two different sources, so you can't. So the $200,000 that we have in the budget, I had to take out of the budget, out of Article 2, and I made a new Article 3. Now, it's your choice to what to do, but in no uncertain terms, the voters must vote on a separate article just for that $200,000. So the 55,306 reflects, it was 55,506.
So we could increase what is now Article 4 to
You could do it that way.
800,000.
The way this is written now, Article 2 and Article 3, if they pass, they affect your taxes. It's the same net effect as we've been talking about. Article 4 and Article 5 only put money in if there's money left at the end of this year. So you could So I have Article 3 saying, if you say yes on that, your taxes are going up, those 7 cents that I just took out. If you increase Article 4 and leave Article 4 the way it is, then that, and say you make that 800,000, that will only get funded at the end of the year if there's money left, and only to the extent there's money left. So it's one is a mandatory, and one is if there's money left.
So if we want to be sure that we're putting money in a capital reserve fund, we need to leave
Have it separate.
sort of like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, assuming it votes yes.
So I'm curious about like what's our latitude in terms of wording here, because I guess like I was concerned when I saw this, just because I think that it does sort of strip away any context or any information, which I know like none of these really have like a ton of context information, but they have some. Like there is a little bit of information kind of provided in some of the other articles. And I think my concern is that like a voter walking in who, you know, a lot of people are not walking in having like come to any board meetings or read all the articles in the paper. They're just sort of like looking at this stuff and then saying, okay, well, I'd like to check no on one of these. Which one am I going to do? And I think that, you know, and I'm not trying to, people are doing their best, but I guess I was curious about like, can we provide some context for the thinking behind that? Can we add a sentence which says why? What can we do here, if anything?
I mean, whatever we do, I will send to our lawyer and to DRA again, so we can try to write something if you want, and if they say you can't do that, I mean, I've seen DRA at other times say that's too confusing. We had a Warrant article. We have some stability at DRA, and that's good. But years and years ago, I had told the board, based on my experience in Claremont with my Department of Revenue rep, that you have to put, I think I wanted them clumped together with a bond vote, and they said that's too confusing, you have to break them apart. So I don't feel like that would happen this time. My point is only that there's a little bit of
Potential leeway.
it's the person, subjectivity, that's the word. But they're also the money god, so if an article is disapproved by our DRA advisor, it's out. So we got to make sure they're on board with it. But if you think you want to add some language, this language comes from a template they give you online, and it is very barren. I do know that it's a template, so you're not stuck to it. You just know that if you use this wording, they're going to approve it. Otherwise, you got to ask them.
So I guess I get what you're saying about something right in the face of the voters, but I think one that I'm a little less concerned about is because we do now put how the school board recommends, and I do think that carries weight if you're in the booth and you're not quite sure, oh, how am I supposed to vote or not, and you see that the majority of the board supports it.
I agree.
But the second part is then there's usually the annual report that comes out too, and in there you have the opportunity to go in a little more depth and explain kind of what happened. So not everyone reads the annual report, but I think that's a second layer of education for those that do show up at the polls and are interested in reading that.
The textbook answer is, that's what the deliberative session is for, to explain what the warrant articles are for. It's textbook because who knows shows up.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, I get it, and also but I think that like it's worth looking at even the language that we use in our language about the operating budget. Like we include context in there, even though it looks like it's boilerplate. It's not boilerplate, it's context, and it sort of says like, you know, the default budget shall be blah blah blah, which is the same as last year. You know, you're giving context that tells people a little bit more about what they're, in a very succinct way, a little bit more about what it is that's occurring. And I think that like it would make me a lot happier if, for example, we had a line that said, you know, the Lebanon, and I wasn't sure coming into this whether we were able to change this, so I didn't come up with wording to suggest, but I can do that. Like,
we're able to propose the change.
Right,
Put it that
right,
way.
sure.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that in my head it was something like, you know, Lebanon School District Construction and Renovations Capital Reserve Fund, previously established, used to maintain, you know, school buildings or whatever it is. Like, I don't have, again, I don't have wording, but I think that, like, giving some indication of why we're proposing this, feels like it would be important, rather than just saying, we want you to give us more money.
I thought you were thinking about more like putting this money in this fund would allow us to start building something.
Well,
My
Yes.
issue with what you, in your example there, is that when this fund was established, there was a purpose in that warrant article. And even for the special ed one, I had to go look it up from 2004. That purpose matters a lot to the lawyers. So I'd be worried about putting anything purpose related in this warrant article that might contradict what was
Totally
written
fair.
when it was
I
made
think
up.
that's helpful to, like, this is what I'm like, I don't understand all these different pieces, because I know that this is a good idea, because we
Yeah.
need to be, like, I very firmly believe this is a good idea, but understanding how we need to position it, how we need to, how it needs to be sort of done structurally is something that I'm still sort of understanding, but I guess we can, what are the deadlines around kind of making?
I was telling Amy, and I've been saying right along, I'd love to have this done tonight, but it's apparent it's not. So the deadline is, I have to post this stuff according to DRA on or before the last Monday in January, which is the 29th.
Yeah.
So we do have one more board meeting. At the next board meeting, you need to sign the default, the MS-26, which is the budgeted number form, and the warrants. So we have 2 more weeks max.
Okay.
What is the downside of just adding the 200,000? I mean, I know what our initial intent was, and if we cannot provide, I know that sometimes when you go into the polls, if you're doing something with the city statutes or that kind of thing, sometimes there's a little blip on context, and I think in the past we've been told that we can't do that. So if that is true, then, and now that we know that we can't just add it into our budget, what would be the harm in adding those two things together and just?
I mean, I think that,
The only harm is that this makes your taxes go up by 7 cents. It's guaranteed to go in.
But it's not guaranteed to go in if they vote no.
Correct.
right. It's more guaranteed, it's a different guarantee. Right, I mean, I
That's
think,
it, though.
yeah, that's the
I
only.
was gonna smush them together, and I figured we'll leave them apart and have this debate.
So you're saying but the reality is if there's only $200,000 of funds left over, that's all that would go in. Do you know, like, so if we're saying that we're comfortable with 800,000 going in.
After the first million, so after $1 million goes back to taxpayers.
So can
then-
we reduce the $1 million by?
Yep. You can, but that's gonna change the calculus on what you said the tax rate's gonna be, because
Yeah,
they've been doing $1 million. I mean, that's a narrative. That sort of tax rate thing doesn't go on any tax documents. It's just a narrative, not just, but it's a narrative during the deliberative session and during discussions, is that this is what the impact's gonna be.
Right.
But it's not like that gets published anywhere. Although I have seen communities put the tax rate, that's why I know you can add some things. Some communities have said, you'll put the tax rate on.
So can we find out, or do you believe it's true that we can't add a narrative to our, like, so if we were going to say the reason that you see Article 3 and 4 as different things is it was the intention of the board to include $200,000 to go into the capital reserve fund in order to start to build that fund.
I don't want to make any assumption. I made an assumption that I was wrong. So I know that you're not stuck to exactly these words. I'm fine with writing something else and submitting for review and have them say. And
Yeah, but I
secondly,
think the
doing
question
work.
is can we have some
Outside of the warrant article, in
outside
addition
of
to it.
the warrant article?
Oh, on
they
the
just-
warrant? I mean, on the thing in the voting booth?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Because I give this warrant to the city and they put it on a ballot.
So how come the city can
The city
have
has,
further
they have
explanation
context on
of
theirs.
their?
Oh, I
So
don't know.
that's the question. Let's
They-
find out about that,
yeah.
because
Yeah, because like sometimes, like if they're changing
they have a little
some-
cheat sheet, yeah. And it says, this is what this means, and this is what this means, and.
Right.
I didn't know that.
But they do it with zoning amendments.
Yeah,
Right,
they've done it for
they-
multiple
right,
times,
so
for multiple
there
things,
usually
so.
some clarification, because they have the standard language that's legal that you're voting on, but then they have
Oh, fine. I didn't know that.
something descriptive.
That would be really great, like,
Yeah,
feel
for
like-
all of them, it would be great, yeah.
In Plainfield, we have to sit in a room all Saturday, so I don't even have experience at this, so I'll find out. That's good.
Yeah, no, so when you're in the booth, it's like article, you know, this
Yeah.
is.
This is what this means, and, oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So let's check into that.
And
see
even if
that's
that has to be the exact same thing that we publish in our annual report, then we'll make sure that our annual report
coincides with what
is
we have.
the same thing that we want to pull out to have in the booth.
So
Okay.
if we can do that, if we can have explanation, let's make sure we know what we're doing. If we can have explanation, then do we want to keep Article 3 separate from Article 4? Or do we want to combine the two? I mean, I think we have to make a choice about that regardless of whether we can have explanation or not. So it depends on one or the other.
I think they're separate. I mean, I
Okay.
guess my feeling is that they are separate issues, they are separate strategies, they're fully separate questions. And I think people should be allowed to vote one way on one and a different way on another. I mean, obviously, I don't want to encourage them
Right.
to vote a particular way, but
All right, so that's one, Steve?
In your thought of potentially, or the idea of combining them, you combine them in the model of Article 3 or in the model of Article 4?
It would be combined in the model of Article 4.
Right, so that depends on us, that's contingent on us having a sufficient,
Right.
like a $1.8 million
Right.
unspent balance, right? And
But if the
your
200
best guess at this point is, where do you think that's gonna land?
What has it been historically?
Oh, yeah.
Let's say that.
I mean, we're usually sending back, well, since I've been here, we've funded all of these and usually had about 1.2-ish left over. So send 1.2 back to the taxpayers, fund $600,000. This is a little tighter year, but
So I think you would
I don't know,
expect
I don't think,
for-
personally, if I was a betting man, I would not say you're gonna have $1 million plus
Plus
$800,000. You might have 6 or even 5. I mean, if it's less than 6, you put in whatever's left, is the point.
I think it's confused. I don't know that the way, if I wasn't listening to this and I had no further explanation, I wouldn't understand why these two things are separate.
Yeah, I think.
I don't think the language of the warrant articles,
I think if we had.
I could see somebody voting yes for the first one because it's 200,000 and no for the second one.
I mean, truthfully, like, I guess, yeah, I mean, I
there's
think
some
you're right, but, I mean, context, but that, so it's sort of like, if we can provide more context, that, I think in some ways changes the answer, but.
How about,
Well, I can see actually just the opposite, because to me, Article 4 says no amount to be raised from taxation, so as a voter, I'm like, oh, score, free money.
But
I'll
I mean,
vote
but I think
yes,
the point is people could skew either way
Right, yeah,
based
no,
on
I-
whatever little particular piece their brain picks up on, and that's the concern a little
Right.
bit.
what about a sentence that says in Article 3, this amount to be raised from taxation? Like, maybe that would be clear.
But then
Yeah,
for
but
sure
not in
we
a
vote it
nice way.
down.
I don't think we want to say like, come here and let me tax you.
Nobody's gonna agree with that.
Come closer.
So I think, so then what we're saying, if we can provide additional context, we don't know if we can or not, but if we could provide additional context, then do we want them separate? And if we can't provide additional context, what do we wanna do?
So I think that's the way I would go, is if we can provide some educational context for each one, I would leave it the way it is.
Okay.
If we can't, I would just get rid of Article 3 and make Article 4 1.8.
Does everybody
And the additional context is, you mean, is this
separate? from-
separate thing
yes.
in the booth?
Yes.
Explanation.
That's what I'm
That's
gonna
what
ask
we're
our
talking
lawyer
The
about.
rationale
Yes.
behind it.
Yes,
Okay.
and we can wordsmith that later, but like,
Yeah.
let's just see if that's possible. Are we in agreement
So
about that?
I
No?
think the question would be, how, with Article 5, like, how important is it for us to also fund that?
So, and I have these listed, and most of you know this, but as far as the articles that add money from fund balance, they go in order of importance. So if there's money for 4, that gets funded first, and 5 only gets funded after there's $1 million and 4 is funded.
So if
So you can flip them around if you
right.
want to.
Well, so the other thing is that if the 200,000 in Article 3 is going to raise taxes anyway, then I guess I might consider reducing the 1 million to 8 because the net effect is the same.
But then you have to do your recalculation.
I guess the concern though that I have about this, and the reason that I feel like we wanted to start a trend, to start a habit of adding money deliberately to the
Capital
construction
reserve.
and to the capital reserve fund, not as a way of, not as saying just like, well, if we've got money left over, let's throw some in, is that to my mind, it's more like, you know, if you're saving for retirement, it's not a great strategy to say like, well, if I have some money left over at the end of the year, I'll put some in. You actually want to be more proactive about sort of planning for things that are going to happen. These are expenses that are going to occur. And so having as part of our district strategy that we are planning for them, that we aren't relying on the sort of vicissitudes of whatever happens in the year and maybe we have some money left over, maybe we don't. Like, that's not a great plan, and it doesn't feel like it's fair to, it doesn't feel like it's fair to the younger students. It doesn't, that's not a good way of doing things. I think that's sort of how we've been doing it, and it means that we are underfunding our capital reserves. So I think it's actually important, even in some ways, even if it gets defeated this year, to me that's an opportunity for more communication, to continue working on it. I wouldn't see that as me saying like, well, we're done with that idea. It's, I mean, I think it's actually an important thing.
I think if people don't understand it, I think the potential for it to impact the next article after it. I mean, because ideally we want to put both the amounts in to our capital reserve. So if we get the 200,000 but we lose the 600,000, we're in a worse place in my mind.
I mean, what if we like bump up the no amount to be raised from taxation in terms of Article 4? Like, have that, can we put that sort of like, you know, at the very beginning, no amount to be raised from taxation. See if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate. I mean, I don't know. Is there some way of just sort of reshuffling the way that we're communicating it? Because like that feels like a communication strategy issue rather than.
I know that was a for instance, but that won't fly. They want the
They
article
won't
to
do
start
that.
with 2C.
I like the
Or just
idea.
make the last sentence.
Bold. Can we
Make
use
the last
font?
sentence
Do we have
more
font
good.
choice?
This
Like-
will not result in any additional taxation.
Well, and I think I don't think
know
that
it says that, but it says
I
it
don't
a
think we
little
ever
bit
have
clearly.
any issue with number 4. Like they're always funded.
No, they always fund number 4, yeah.
But they're not always present when there are 2 other asks
Right.
for special funds.
Right. I think you know, sort of like looking at the whole thing.
Yeah, no, we always have capital reserve and we always
Yeah,
have
it's always
special
separate.
ed.
Right, but you don't always have 2 other reserve fund requests on the same warrant request.
So usually you
Yeah,
have
we do.
2
Yeah, we-
always,
Oh.
2, because we have
Well,
the
we haven't had the special ed one in a few years.
We had it a couple times. We've had it on and off, so not every
That's
time,
not
but yeah.
regular occurrence. So
Mhm.
We're asking them to take yes more times.
Mhm.
So, Tim,
Although
is
last
there-
time it was like
is
9.
there- I mean, as part of this problem, so how do school districts save money in a capital reserve fund that isn't part of end-of-year funds? Like, so,
They use a warrant article like this, or they had a warrant article. We used to have a different cap reserve fund, if you remember. That was a warrant article that said, do you authorize the sale of buildings, and the money will be put into a
so
special ed, into a
here's the
cap
question.
reserve
So
fund.
if we think that we'll definitely have 800,000, why don't we just leave Article 3 and change that to 8?
Because then you have to raise it for taxes.
I don't know if we'll definitely have 8. I'm saying that we want the if we have 8, we'll do the special ed, but if,
Right.
you know what I mean? I'm saying that we want the 6 first. It's like, and maybe if we have 8, we'll do the second one. I really don't have an opinion. I think you guys are both making good points. I like the cheat sheet idea to kind of explain what we're doing, and you actually have a good point that maybe they say no this year, but we keep beating on it, so in the future they say yes. I actually also think that we have 2 problems. One, we haven't been putting enough in, but we've been really aggressive in spending out of it, so
Okay, I have a proposal. First, if we can, I think we've all agreed, looks like. If we can get additional context outside of these, we want to leave them as is right now. Yes? Am I, no? Kevin's looking at me like I have no idea what you're
I
saying.
don't know, I wonder how many people will read those, but, and then also, it does feel like sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'd rather see fewer things.
Okay. Mary, what do you think?
I think yes.
You think you'd leave them? Okay, Wendy?
I think I would just increase Article 4 to 8.
Okay, Tia?
I'm fine keeping them separate.
Okay, and this
With
is
the
this is
cheat-
when
with the cheat sheet,
This is the
right?
cheat sheet. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
if we have a cheat sheet. I am fine keeping them separate with the cheat sheet.
Me too.
Jessica,
Yeah.
Kevin, Steve, yes, Kevin. You.
I wouldn't put my foot down, I don't think it's.
Okay. Okay. So that's the majority is saying, okay, if we have the cheat sheet, we keep them as is. Now, if we don't have the cheat sheet, all right, that Mary, if we don't have the cheat sheet, what would you want to do?
I still leave them the same.
Still leave them separate, okay? Wendy?
I would just go with Article 4.
Go with Article 4. Okay. Tia?
Leave them separate still.
Okay. I don't know yet. What,
I know.
MJ?
I would leave them separate.
Leave them separate. Jessica?
I would leave them separate. I would be still inclined to try to
Add something to
massage the language a little bit.
Of 3.
I think that I would probably, if we couldn't add additional context, I would be revisiting the language
Yeah.
of the whole thing a little bit.
I agree. I mean, and we can do that still, regardless of what happens. Okay, Steve?
Without context, I would get rid of Article 3 and up Article 4 to 800.
Okay. Kevin?
It's fine.
Yeah, and that's actually what I said to Tim originally in the email. Is that's what I would do too, is I would combine them. So that is,
Split.
it's split. Great.
Tim.
So if we come away with 1.6, then the $600,000 goes to the school buildings fund and the $250,000 doesn't get funded.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do you know that by that? It just doesn't seem clear to me from.
You wouldn't know that, but I have talked to DRA about this every year, and that's how they fund it.
And they're fine with this.
And they,
Fine.
well, they
You
say,
can do whatever you
make sure
want.
you're in the order you want them, because that's how they're gonna get funded, is what they say.
Yeah.
And if I might go, that's not what I wanted, they'll be like, too bad, so sad, but.
So, okay, so Tim, we are split, and there's only 8 of us today. So,
Well, we can, I mean, I have to find out.
Yeah, I gotta find
information
out.
about the first thing anyway, so you got 2 weeks to.
to think
convince
about it.
someone else.
Okay. Yeah, and again, get
No,
Lisa to come to
We
that.
have to have a warrant on on the 24th.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then on 25th, I'm gonna send, if you, electronically, usually works okay, but everybody has to check their email, so on the 25th,
Right.
I'm gonna need it.
So he'll warn us, we'll be expecting somebody to sign electronically, we'll all check, we'll all help his blood pressure to stay under control.
Thankfully, our clerk is
Yeah.
in-house now.
Okay, so you will get back to us.
Will do.
Okay, great. And that is only part 1, you have something else to share? No, so this is the default budget, which we don't have to worry about, that's just,
Yeah, that's,
just presenting it
you're
for
gonna
us.
sign this electronically, so.
Later.
Well, you're gonna approve it hopefully in the new business part, discussion and action,
Yes.
default budget approval.
Yes.
And that can be, you can bump that too if you want, if you run out of time.
We'll come back to that.
I think
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thanks. All right, we're going to listen to the DDECIA update, and then we'll take a break. So, Karen, you're up. Thank you for waiting.
Something non-financial.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
It's not financial. Very exciting. So I'm here today to provide you with an update related to the New Hampshire Department of Education Division of Accountability and Assessments. Each year, as part of the DOE's compliance with the Every Student Succeeds Act, the state identifies schools needing support based on indicators that are associated with the annual state testing results. This year, Hanover Street School was identified for additional targeted support and improvement. That's ATSI is the acronym. This designation indicates that a subgroup of students performed below state cut scores over the past 3 years. In this case, the subgroup of students in question is students identified as having a disabling condition. The academic leadership team for the district, as well as Hanover Street School, has met together with state data analysts to understand what led to this designation. The indicators in question are in the areas of achievement, growth, and equity. In order to exit ATSI status, this subgroup of students must demonstrate improvement in those 3 indicator areas in each area in 2 of the next 3 years, or exceed the state designated cut score in each area at least once over the next 3 years. Together, the leadership team is planning to work with work with teachers to ensure student growth and progress for this subgroup of students that's been identified. And we're also working to ensure that our systems of registration and test participation are accurate, as that may have had an impact on the score results for this group of students as well. So we feel confident in our ability to address the designation productively, and that's my update. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. There were lots of acronyms and information in there.
Good.
So when they do the retesting the following, are they always following the same cohort, like the same students, or the same designation of the students? So like if someone was in second grade, are they gonna follow them now until 5th grade, or are they only following just all students with this designation?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So the state testing begins in 3rd grade. So for Hanover Street School, it's only 2 grade levels, 3rd and 4th. And of the 3 indicators, the growth indicator measures growth from 3rd to 4th. So that indicator is only relevant for even a smaller subset of Hanover Street students. The designation is associated with the school, not the cohort of students. So some of the students in question have gone on to our middle school at this point. New students are coming in. So they're looking at students within that subgroup year to year over the course of 3 years. Does that make sense to everybody?
So it's different students, but they're
Doesn't really
different
seem
students.
fair way to measure growth then if you're not retesting the same students.
There's nothing we can do about that.
This is the way that they have organized their metrics.
And so is there any, have they taken into consideration COVID and impact of that, or?
That's a great question. So yes, some of these metrics were altered or adjusted, and the designation was paused briefly during the COVID years. We are now in our 3rd test year beyond the COVID years, so that's no longer a significant consideration on the part of the DOE. And again, it's a federal compliance provision that they engage in this process, although the way in which they engage in it and the metrics they use are state determined.
So there's approximately 21, 22 students within this cohort, so it's a relatively small, so we want to make sure we're protecting them. But part of that is we have to meet a participation, 95% participation within that cohort. So if parents have opted out for testing, which we have a state where we can opt out, 1 or 2 students opt out, so we'll then start counting as zeros. So that can have a huge impact on that. So we've discovered in our short time there, there was kind of historical where people, I think, I've seen this across in other districts too, is kind of pushing you can opt out. Our federal responsibility is to post it on our website and have parents have access to the opt-out forms. We really should be encouraging people to take the assessments because will give a data point on how we're doing within our curricular pieces and how our students are doing compared to other students across the state.
So, yes, I'm catching up on what, but do we have as what I'm understanding from what you're saying is that like the Hanover Street School was designated as underperforming in one metric. Is that an accurate?
Across 3 metrics for one subgroup of students, not in general. It's important to note they're not underperforming in general as a school. There are additional designations that are considerably more significant as a finding in this process. and carry different associated
This one has,
consequences.
there's ATSI, assisted targeted improvement. So we're looking at subgroups, and then they could be having a comprehensive school needs improvement where that's your whole school,
Okay.
really targeted
Yeah.
process.
Okay, so this is
Sometimes
saying.
that comes with financial pieces to help do this. We're really into a piece where we have assistants to look at our data to find out the reasons why and really target.
Yeah, because okay, so that's so helpful, but I think what I was understanding is that the subgroup that was identified as underperforming was students with a disabling condition, right? So kids with
Yes.
disabilities.
And I would
So-
characterize it as performing at a rate lower than the state-determined cut score
Okay.
in those 3 areas.
Okay, but do we have a theory about why this happened? I mean, like, do we have a theory? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
hearing a lot of words from you guys that makes it sound like you think this is essentially a data issue and not an
Well, I
actual.
think a huge component of it, and I'm not a mathematician, but I do think the non-participation in the assessments had a huge impact to this designation piece.
And to be clear, we're also looking at other
Instructional
factors, including,
practices.
we'll be meeting with teachers and talking about instructional practice to ensure that this group is demonstrating adequate growth, achievement, et cetera.
And even within this group, can there be a wide range of ability? So like, can it
Again,
vary a little
we have
bit?
to, because the cohort is so small and it is a protected class, we wouldn't want to make statements about the variability of learner capabilities within this specific subgroup. But certainly within any subgroup of students, there can be a range of ability
And growth expectation.
and growth expectation.
But that's going to be built into the metric. I mean,
It is, and,
Yeah.
and again, it's, the state sets a cut score with
That in
presumably
mind.
that in mind.
yeah.
It seems like with such a small cohort, you're behind the 8 ball when anyone non-participating.
Exactly, because we originally, our interpretation for that piece is it was 95% of the whole group, but it really is 95% of your subgroup. So, because we were like, I'm like, no, that 0 piece can't, because we've had, we looked at our opt-outs and things like that.
That's really a methodologic issue that needs to be corrected.
It's a
at the
small
state
data
level
piece
as well.
too, so.
I
Yeah.
think, as I understand it from my, my work with the State Accountability Office and their presentations, that there's just a conflict between the federal requirement of 95% participation and our state's robust opt-out options that our legislature has provided, so.
If the cohort is less than X number of students, then an opt-out shouldn't be a 0.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's, again, we can't.
As they have explained it to me, there is not a workaround for that challenge.
So we'll be working with the schools and the teachers and communicating with parents why this assessment is important
Yep.
for them to do and make sure we're creating conditions for students to be motivated to take the assessment, things like that.
Any other questions about this? Or anything else that you'd like to ask me today? Happy to talk about other things.
All right, thank
The
you.
calendar, how's the calendar going?
No, she's got
Next
lots of work on
time.
that.
In
That's
two-
coming soon.
2 short weeks. You should have a calendar in your.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate your
Thanks a lot. Thank
update.
you.
Okay, so we are going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and do our unfinished business, which is just a second reading, and then we'll move on to our new business. So, see you back here in, 8:13? Can't add. Let's go to 8:20. 8:20. 7 minutes, I lied. 8:20. it's not 8:20 yet. Everybody's here. We're gonna start. All right. I'd like to call the meeting back to order, which moves us to unfinished business, and we are doing discussion and action on the second reading of various policies. Do I have some motions?
So I'll make a motion to approve the policies listed under unfinished business. Yes.
Okay. Can I get a second? Oh, Mary. Sorry, Mary seconded. I didn't hear you. Moved by Wendy, seconded by Mary. Do we have any additional comment on these particular policies?
Nope. We have to
Okay.
list them
Do we have to list them? Okay.
in the minutes.
I think,
Oh.
I mean, I think.
She's
as long
got
as we-
them.
Okay.
She's got the agenda, so it's those policies. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion to approve the second reading of the policies listed on your agenda, please indicate. Yes, okay, unanimous, thank you. All right, that moves us to new business. First is discussion and action on an RFP at Hanover Street.
Thank you. I did add this at the last minute. As you know, the CCB will not be providing childcare next year. After speaking with our leadership team and Principal Whelan, we thought potentially of creating an RFP and to have a childcare room at Hanover Street. So we'd have an organization to come in to run childcare out of Hanover Street. I would put together a draft RFP with Tim's guidance, and given that the timing of this, bring it to the next board for you guys' feedback. Just knowing that lots of our staff and community members are losing valuable childcare, and the wait list for area childcare is 45, 50 people on a wait list there now. So I think it'd be an important thing to do for the community, but I also think it'd be beneficial as we look to develop our own preschool models and expand that for the future. So I'd only be looking for one classroom for a multi-year time.
So the idea behind this, so we were talking, and I mentioned that we did an RFQ, whatever term, there's no money involved for the district in this idea. We did this for the after-school program a bunch of years ago. We said we're looking for a company to provide after-school stuff, and these are the parameters. Basically, you pay, the parents pay you. And so we thought maybe we could try that on the whole preschool thing. So the idea would be, but we're thinking, parents pay, so it doesn't cost the district anything. But we would want to put in there something like I don't know, we haven't really talked about the cost, but we were thinking maybe something discounted from normal and 3 pointed towards Lebanon district employees. So those are the kind of broad, we haven't really done much besides, I pulled up the old RFQ, that's it, but that's the idea.
Wait, Steve had a hand up.
No, Tim spontaneously had.
Okay, look at that. All right, go ahead.
Well, that's just it. So you're calling it childcare, but my understanding is what's closing at the CCB is the preschool.
Right,
So
so, yes,
are
it'd
we
be-
proposing to run a district employee preschool program or
We're
strict
not going to be
childcare?
running this at all. It would be, yeah.
Or offering additional preschool or just
Offering space for
childcare?
someone to come in to run that preschool childcare. for the- in
And
that
so is
classroom.
it birth to 5 or I
No, we
haven't
would
thought
look
that?
for the 3 to 4.
Okay.
3, 4, 5, yeah, absolutely. We're not equipped for infant.
So Lil and I just chatted briefly because I had asked what that was.
Yep.
And in Hanover, their rec department provides, they do like a toddler morning out. I mean, I think of like a preschool-ish kind of thing during the day. They also are in charge of the after-school program, and then they do the summer camp stuff. And so it might be also worth checking.
See if the rec department.
Yeah, see if that's any interest of theirs in expanding that, since they already do Camp Kaleidoscope.
Yep.
Because it would be great to sort of be able to like extended care just sort of in general and be able to offer all of that.
Right, and I know, speaking with the city manager, they're still doing their capital fundraising for the child care center. So I think that's a few years out anyways, but this community is certainly is desperate need for preschool and early child care.
Yeah, I had just a question. I know a lot of high schools have kind of the family consumer sciences. Do we have anything like that where high school students would have the opportunity to be part of this classroom that you might create and get some high school credit for that?
That would be something that we could build for that RFP, certainly, and kind of just that pipeline to our teacher apprentice program. too,
Right, right.
With our own students that are interested in going into education. I think certainly we could explore that.
Sort of exploiting the unique circumstance where our high school students
Are right next door.
immediately
Yeah.
adjacent to Hanover Street.
Right.
Right.
Not using the word exploit.
Take advantage of.
And a lot of the students love that class, right? They love being there.
Yeah, yeah. Jessica?
Two things. Thing one, do we have a classroom available for this?
We will next year after the renovation
Okay.
is built. So I did speak with the principal to see, if this idea would just not work or if there was a space, and she was absolutely for that. So this is something that she had tried to do in her previous district.
Sure.
Just felt that need to be able to support that for the community.
Great. I feel extremely supportive of this idea. I'm sure that will shock you. One of the things that I've also been thinking about in terms of the city's proposal and sort of what they're doing, and the fact that it's probably going to take a real long time for it to happen, if it happens at all, is that the teacher training piece.
Yep.
That's one of the pieces of their proposal that has occurred to me. Like, I don't really understand why we have to wait to build an entire building before we can start to build a teacher training program, and like that seems like something we ought to be able to do a little more briskly than theoretically ever. And so, I would strongly, I think this is wonderful, to go forth, but it strikes me this is a wonderful opportunity to have a couple of these programs kind of maybe taking root together. So.
Absolutely, and as we, students that go off to Hartford, this is just another avenue for our own kids that could stay at the high school full day.
Can I ask one more question? In Hanover, part of the advantage of, and I think that they're also talking about building preschool capacity, and they don't have the space that they're for it yet at this point. But one of the advantages is people who work there then have benefits through the town, and stuff like that. So, if the city didn't want to, the rec department didn't want to sort of consider this kind of thing, can we still, the amazing thing is that these programs are actually self-sustaining and can generate some income to cover their costs. Is that not something that we can do? So if we wanted to start this program, I know. but the reality is that can we charge?
What the idea was is that there's a lot of people who work in the district, or many people work in the district, who use the CCBA 3 to 5 year old thing that's going away. So is it even possible to offer, you're still going to pay, instead of paying CCBA, you're going to pay whatever provider comes in, not the district. And it's like a kernel of an idea. If there's anybody who's interested, and it could be something that they come work for the Lebanon district, and by the way, we have some preschool spots for if you got young kids. Does it grow into something where it's some sort of official benefit or something like that? I think that that's in the future, but really, it was really just a kernel we came out of our head a week ago. So
Yeah.
we would like the opportunity to sort of see what's out there.
I'm sort of like, let's say yes to anything you want to start the kernel of an
But
idea.
I'm just saying, if there's not somebody that comes forward,
Right.
Then
And
I don't know
think
what
that
we
we
do.
could have that conversation.
then, because
would
the
we wanna
reality
do
is
that?
they usually do pay for themselves.
Right.
And I think, sorry, I don't want to put too much pressure on this conversation.
But
No,
I'm
and
just
I-
saying,
and I think our
as a
idea
school
just-
district, can we charge,
That's a good question.
a rate that's reasonable, not what we charge for?
And that's one of the things I think we'd have to look to see, because I know the Title I piece, and we'd have to
Yeah,
look to
I
that.
mean, this is the issue. So we have this preschool program already, that's a special ed program. We do charge for the regular peers a really small amount, like just a few $100s a month. And so, the reason why we would want this to be separate, especially in the beginning, is we have to work out how those to would interact, and then what, you know, you can't run a preschool program here, I don't think, we haven't had time to check, a school-sponsored one here and that one over there, and then what are the rates, and it gets really messy. So this is a way to hopefully roll something out pretty quickly by kind of staying, all we're providing you is the space and the customers.
They're very different models. I mean, I think like what the beginnings preschool at Mount Lebanon School does is they take your kid for 2 hours, 3 days a week if they're 3, and 3 hours, 4 days a week if they're 4. That's not childcare. So I think like what you're talking about is providing childcare, which is different from preschool. These are actually distinct things, and I feel like it's really great.
And we could collaborate on terms which we've wanted to do with professional development, right? Because these kids hopefully are going to be filtering in to the Lebanon School District, and we know the benefits of quality for the child.
And I think it might help as part of this discussion, as it may be helping in writing the RFP, it might help to talk specifically to the CCBA director about what is the structure that they have right now, so that we know what it is that's going, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, I mean, I have generally idea of what that is, but I think it'd be helpful to, like, we have this many sessions, we do this many hours, we are doing a morning session and afternoon session.
That's a great idea.
Just, I think it'd be important to get those details from them, so we just know.
And presumably the CCBA is a meaningful possible partner in this, because they're closing their program partly because of the flooding and the renovations that would be needed. I mean, it's like if you had a space that you're sort of saying like, hey, we've got a space that you can use, it's conceivable that they are actually.
They're doing it because they're, in addition to that, their director is leaving and they've had struggling to be able to staff their own.
But if they had a partnership could change that dynamic.
It could.
So it just.
Yeah, it's worth talking to them in general, but. Okay.
Yay.
Sorry.
Yes.
Don't get too excited, we have to write it and see if anybody wants to do it.
I am excited that the conversation has taken this turn, not that everything happens beautifully, but very excited.
This is.
It is.
Like the kernel.
I told them.
When I heard the colonel, I said, Jessica's gonna be so excited. All right.
The other thing, my friend Nicole, who's the director at the Hanover one, I'm sure would be happy to just
absolutely
have a conversation about what it's taken to get that program off the ground, and if they expanded it, she's been doing it for years now.
So we need to have a motion so we can take some action on this.
Move to do the thing.
Okay, so
I move to make the RFP.
Support the RFP.
That thing.
All right,
yeah.
Jessica makes a motion to support the RFP. Steve seconds. Any further discussion or questions? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? No. All right, unanimous. Excellent. All right, that brings us back to flip back in your program, back to the default budget approval. So we need discussion. We need to take action. We already had discussion on the default budget.
So we need a motion to approve the default budget of $54,646,950.
There you go.
So moved.
Okay. All right. MJ has moved it. Seconded by Steve. Is there any additional discussion that anyone would like to make about the default budget? No? Okay. All those in favor of approving the default budget as explained? All right. Unanimous. Excellent. Budget approval. Next.
I would request that we skip the next two to the next meeting.
Skip the next two till the next meeting. Okay, we'll table those two together.
They just go hand in hand, so it's
Yep,
good to do them
that's
together.
fine. I'm fine with that. Oh, I just marked the wrong two table. There we go. Okay. All right. Moving on. Okay. Superintendent evaluation process revisions. All right. So in your packet, you have a revised timeline and explanation of the superintendent annual evaluation process. In 2019, thank you, Wendy, for doing the research. In 2019, the board approved a giant packet of information when we adopted Super Eval that outlined how the superintendent evaluation process was going to proceed. This is a very truncated summary of that. We're just taking out the parts that we're changing. All that we're changing right now is part 2. On your sheet, we're adding the last sentence, in addition, part 2 will include the results of an optional anonymous survey of the superintendent's direct reports, as we discussed and agreed to previously. So that's now going to be a part of the superintendent evaluation process going forward. Did I forget to bring that paper? Oh, it's not here. I asked Lori to include something which is not in this packet. So let me tell you what that is going to say. I'm ready, don't worry. So that survey, the direct reports, which there are 10 people who are the direct reports. So that is the SAU leadership team that reports directly to Amy, including her administrative assistant and Diane, I don't know what her, director of community relations, and the 4 building principals. Those would be the people who would be getting the option to take this anonymous survey. They will receive an email request explaining what it is and giving them a link when they respond, and it will be anonymous. The responses will go to a spreadsheet that is maintained by Xavier in HR. So he will have control over the responses over time so that he can look for overtime trends as well. Once he's gotten all of the responses back or the time has elapsed, they'll be given 2 weeks to do that. Then the chair and the vice chair will meet with HR and summarize and synthesize the information from those direct report surveys, which they will then report back to the board. We'll talk about when that happens in this, but the questions that will be on that survey, they're all open-ended. There's only 4 of them. They're very straightforward. 1, what has the superintendent done particularly well? 2, what would make the superintendent more effective in their role? 3, what else would you like to share about the superintendent? And 4, is there anything else the board should know? Those are the only, we're modeling this after other surveys that have been done in other districts nearby, but that we're making them open-ended. We discussed linking sort of quantitative questions, Likert scale 0 to 5 for the standards in super eval, but we decided that's not necessarily that helpful when we have a group of 10 people. So instead, open-ended is what we're asking for. And again, it's anonymous and they do not have to take it. Now again, there's only 10 of them. But Xavier's going to be having all the information, so we won't see who's written what. No one in the board will see who's written what. Does that make sense? I ran through that really quickly. Confusion?
It makes sense. Are we
so
discussing possible comments on that process?
Right. So that part of the process, yes, in theory we've agreed to this process. We've talked about it in previous board meetings. We just hadn't hammered out the details of what that process would be. I met with Xavier because I wanted to talk it over with him from a legal and HR standpoint, and he has agreed to all of this. This actually is his amended version of things. He's the one who suggested that he be the person in control of the data, and which makes perfect sense to me. It also makes sense in that if HR is going to be the same no matter what, the chair and the vice chair will change, and depending on elections and all kinds of things, and so he will be the person who, or HR in general, will be the person who controls the long-term information.
Yeah, I guess the comments that I would have from a fair amount of experience doing surveys and interpreting them and presenting on them is that I would be concerned, especially with a small group of respondents, that I think you're actually, I don't know, but I strongly suspect you're actually less likely to get open-ended responses from a small group of people because and if you do get responses, they're less likely to be, what's the word for open?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the fear of being identified. And so I guess my thought would have been along the lines of a hybrid where you provide, in terms of those questions, a numeric or a rating, some kind of a rating scale, in addition to please provide any additional comments.
So that was actually my original suggestion to him, and his response back to me was he felt like it was less effective that way based on his experience with survey in this context. He says he feels like the information
that people give on surveys when there are, in educational context, when there are Likert scales, is it's always just 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 down the middle, and that's usually not helpful in determining trends, actual problems, issues that have arisen.
How many of these has he done with a superintendent, with the head of the program, with a
I mean,
relatively
I
small
don't-
number of direct reports? I mean, I guess it feels
This is what-
it feels contextually different than sort of looking at like a broad, so, but.
Yeah, I mean, which is, again, noted. I mean, I think we have to decide what we want to do, right? So we can add the domains that, the standards that Super Eval mentions. The big overarching standards are relationship with the board, community relations, staff relationships, business and finance, and instructional leadership. And then they have specific competencies under each of those areas, ranging from 4 to 6 competencies. We
So-
can absolutely add
So,
quantitative questions.
The domain that seems to most relate to direct reports would be the staff relationship.
Mhm.
So if we look at sort of what's there, I mean,
So there's only 5 under staff relationships. It's internal communications, personnel matters, delegation of duties, recruitment, and visibility.
so I think those are potentially easy enough if we wanted to include those.
I mean, I don't think we have a problem with include. We can add and change whatever we want. We haven't made this thing yet. It will happen as soon as we make it. Go ahead.
I would recommend that in the communication to the people you're hoping to get the surveys completed by, that sort of the anonymity is
Yes,
really
yes.
Reinforced. And not only will you not, that who doesn't get to see it or that it really is anonymous, that even the written comments are going to be
Yep.
synthesized and presented in an aggregate and
Yes.
not directly quoted, so that really it should not be identifiable.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we won't get it ourselves. It will go straight to him, and it will be presented in aggregate, and that's his role, which is normally his role, right? So this is something he's perfectly capable of doing and happy to do.
And in some ways, if we do it both ways to start with,
We can see how
then
it's
we can
useful.
see,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would really, I think
That's
we
fine.
would really appreciate some of the more like, give me a number. If it's all 3s, fine, but.
Well, and I think too, it would be interesting to see if Amy's doing a self-eval on staff relationships, we're also evaluating that and the staff, that's to
Mhm.
see
That
how
little
well
part.
those 3
Mhm.
things correlate.
That's totally fine.
I think it also provides, like, when you give people those specific areas of competencies as, like, questions, I think that actually can help prime the pump a little bit for people in terms of, like, actually calling out specific areas that they may not,
Yep.
maybe they wouldn't have mentioned it in a sort of unprompted, in a question that's just open-ended, whereas if you prompt them, I think we may actually get really helpful feedback in that way, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think and it does make sense. I'm in favor of it, especially if we're doing a small section
Yeah.
of the competencies and not all 30 competencies. That's fine.
I'm just going to use ChatGPT to answer mine. Just
We'll know.
We'll know.
Any other comments about that particular, the direct report survey? No? Okay, so we'll make those adjustments and send that back to Xavier, and he's actually going to create the what's the word that I want? The survey itself. That's not. I had a different plan, but yes, he's going to create the survey. Okay, so then going back to the handout that you had in your packet, the part 2 adds in that direct report survey, and then the full year evaluation cycle is if we're normally evaluating according to the cycle that we adopted in the board adopted in 2019. This is how the cycle goes, and all we've changed to this is that we've added in the surveys in May. Surveys are distributed to direct reports on May 1st and collected by HR on May 15th. And then that gets put in together. The board reviews, the board review of the superintendent mid-year review. So the first thing it says back there in May is that there's a superintendent mid-year review. Mid-year review and the direct report surveys at a non-public session sometime at the last meeting in May. So we're basically on this cycle now. We're just a tiny bit behind, as I said before. Normally, we would be setting goals with the superintendent in December for January through December evaluation process, but we're close enough now that I feel comfortable sticking with this calendar and just kind of speeding up the goal part, which is what we did earlier.
So if you have any objections to this, you can read it over, but if you have any objections to this, just let me know, or any things that we need to change. But this is what, everything else in here is what had been adopted in 2019. The problem with 2019 is they did this in sort of, what, July or August or somewhere earlier in the year.
Yeah, it happened, the evaluation of the tool happened over the summer. We started to adopt it in the fall.
Of 2019.
Of 2019, so we had a partial year until we sort of got into.
And then it was 2020, and then everything got derailed. and then we all forgot that this existed, so.
And the reason that we go offset from the school year
Yes.
is because usually, like, most reviews are happening or finishing up around March, so we wanted to
Right,
be
so
able to do that so that.
in this cycle, and that's what is in the cycle that was in there, there is a mid-year review that happens in May. And if for some reason at that mid-year review, and that's after the direct report surveys, that's after the superintendent does her own mid-year review, if for some reason at that point someone wanted to not renew or whatever, if there was a contract that was finishing in June, that could be a time when we could do that. But we can also change it at different times if there's other issues, but that's where it is right now, built into this. And this is a work in progress. So we're gonna run through a whole full year. There's never been a full year on this cycle yet because of 2020 and because we never knew that this happened. We got off cycle anyway. So we're gonna run through it this year, see how it goes. And at the end, in December, one of the things we'll be doing is evaluating, did this cycle work for us? Do we need to make
I think we had
adjustments?
one year, because we did it before COVID hit. Like, so we had the partial year, then we had the one full year, and then.
Well, this was in August of 2019, and January 2020 is when you would have started your first, according to this, you would have started your first full year in January 2020 through December 2020.
Because I know that I did it once.
Okay.
I remember doing it.
Yeah, so then that's great. So we had it once, so we'll try it again now and see if it still works for us. Because we never evaluated it then after that because we didn't talk about.
Yeah, no, the 2 years I was chair, we did it,
Okay, good.
so.
All right. Any questions about that? No? Okay. So I don't.
I think the important thing to also mention is we had wanted to capture outgoing board members' feedback.
Yes, oh, we did add that. So thank you for reminding me. There in March, and under the full year evaluation cycle, it says outgoing board members have the option to leave a document with HR reflecting on the superintendent, identifying any successes, and explain any areas for growth, including specific examples if they want to, as they leave. Just because that can still be part of the process. So they have, whoever leaves has the option to include something, again, will go to HR and be part of the evaluation
And I think once
packet.
we're on our regular cycle, we won't have to do that, but to try and capture any outgoing this year.
Yeah, we'll see how it.
So is there gonna be a protocol established for doing that? I mean, that's kind of what I was wondering on that.
What,
Well, I think it
Or
will
we
be.
just take on our own as to call up HR and say, hey, I wanna
What's
leave
your-
a note behind.
I think it's anything, I mean, I think this year, I think the thought potentially is because we aren't in the process of finishing up a review, that we have no way to capture any this year's outgoing board members' thoughts. So I think it's just an opportunity for those members who want to comment on Amy, to give that opportunity, and then when we're in our normal cycle, we would capture that anyway, because we would be finishing up in December. So it just, as a way, if somebody
And
wanted.
as far as protocol goes, I'm gonna make sure this is okay, but we talked about, Tyler would continue to have, after elections for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, those board members would still have access to their own email, district email, so they could send this right on to Xavier if they wanted to. It would delay the taking away of access for a little bit, which is fine, because it doesn't really matter, but they would still have the opportunity to do that. And we would send out a reminder. It's time, if you're leaving, you can do this. This is the option that you have. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So we don't have to act on this. We just have to know that this is how we're going forward. Okay, moving on to F, discussion and action of. Whoa,
Will.
sorry.
So I think we do need at least head nod, because policy is trying to
Oh, yes.
create a policy.
Policy is trying to make the policy that matches this.
Yes.
So are people comfortable with this timeline, this process that we've talked about today enough for policy to be able to hammer out the language of it? Yes, head nod, are you giving a nod?
Yeah, I guess my one caveat would be with, back to the check-in in May, that policy, and they make the review, it has to kind of tie in if you decide you don't want to renew the contract based on your mid-year check-in in May, that you're meeting all of your notice clauses in your contract to just make sure that's kind of in your policy.
90 days.
So we might have
So
to
then
move it
that
back.
wouldn't really necessarily be
In May, it would be before that. All right, so we'll have to.
I think that that's why like finishing up the cycle.
I mean, I was just going with what this was, and it was saying in May, so we can move it.
No, but I think I think the reason for having it go January to December is so that if there's a potential non-renewal, that it's known.
In December.
In December.
Yeah. So it's plenty of
So
time
that
for the June.
the contract wouldn't be.
That makes sense.
Just be cognizant of all those
Yes.
when developing policy,
Yeah.
that's all I ask.
Good plan. I like it. Okay, so discussion and action, donation of $1,795 to funding for librarian to purchase school system version of the Vimeo movie, The First Day, Chris Herren's story from the Hypertherm HOPE Foundation. Can I get a motion first, and then we'll get additional information?
Make a motion to approve the donation of $1,795 for funding for the library to purchase the school system version of the Vimeo movie, The First Day, Chris Herren story from the Hypertherm HOPE Foundation.
Can I get a second? Mary seconds. Okay, can we get additional, is there any additional information about
Sure, I
this?
just want to thank Hypertherm HOPE Foundation for reaching out for us. They had this, and it will be used within health and other ways. It's a substance abuse prevention video.
Okay, any other questions?
Is it used at all, like middle school and above is the intent, or
It's-
just high school?
It's designated for high school.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of accepting the donation? Okay, thank you. And we want to thank, as Amy said, the Hypertherm HOPE Foundation for donating that. Moving on, discussion and action, approve the donation of $20,000 from Century Restaurants Jersey Mike's for Lebanon High School Principal donation. Can I get a motion on this?
Make a motion to approve the donation of $20,000 from the Century Restaurants Jersey Mike's group for the Lebanon High School Principal Principal Fund.
Yeah, fund, I should say. All right, and second by Steve. Thank you, MJ and Steve. And we've already discussed this. We have any additional questions? I mean, I think as we said before, like learning more about how these funds are used would be helpful, especially considering I think this is significantly bigger than the funds have been in the past. So we'd like to, in the interest of transparency, to know what's happening there.
Do they have any interest in making this an annual?
I think they just do it on their first opening day. So they're hoping that they're not having another opening day. They're considering continuing on. Okay, so all those in favor of accepting the donation, approving the donation? Yes, great. And once again, thank you very much to the Century Restaurant Group and Jersey Mike's for this generous donation. All right, we are going to have a brief non-public. What? Oh, under what? It is. Yes, it is C. C. So can I get a motion?
I will make a motion to enter non-public under NHRSA 91A32C.
Okay, motion by MJ, second by Steve. We have to have a roll call to go into non-public. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
MJ?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Tia?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Yes.
Mary? Okay, great. We'll be back shortly. Briefly, shortly. I think it will be short. We are going to committee updates. So, Finance and Facilities, the next meeting is Thursday, January 18th at 4:15 p.m. at the SAU. Policy Committee, you met on January 8th.
We did. So we didn't want to overwhelm the board, so we decided to, any policies that we're moving to the board for a first reading, we will do so at our next board meeting. Also, I would encourage our board colleagues to check out the minutes, because we have started to just review certain policies and mark them reviewed. So if you have any questions about which policies we're sort of moving through in that process, they will be reflected in the meeting minutes. We've also, we're getting sort of our rhythm down. And so sometimes there are policies, when we get into the discussion of them, we're realizing they impact other people, and we're wanting to make sure our policies are reflecting our process. So we're tabling them in policy and sort of pushing them out to SALT or transportation or finance, those kinds of things. So, and we're going to meet again on the 25th, because we missed our December meeting, so we want to make sure that we keep our cycle moving.
Great, thank you. Education Committee met Monday, January 8th.
Yes, so we've been talking more about finalizing or getting a complete school calendar. I believe one of the big pieces is waiting for Hartford School District and trying to make sure that we're aligning with them as much as we can. Discussions of, we did discuss the policy IMBA distance education, and that is going to the lawyer, then probably back to policy, right? And then it'll get kicked back here. So that will be in the future. And yeah, just working on that, building the ELA for K through 4. What is that going to look like? We've also had some discussions about professional development days, how to support the teachers with all of the, especially with the new Eureka Math program, which is a very dense program, and so there's just a lot, and it seems to be, from what it sounds like to me, an easy program to kind of feel like you're behind on. And I know my daughter missed math today, so I don't know how stressed that made the teachers, but kind of discussing how can we support that and support the teachers in that. So, if anybody else has anything else?
No, in our next meeting, we're going to be talking about we're going to be reviewing the policy that delineates what Education Committee does to make sure that it still aligns with what we are doing. We haven't looked at that for a while, so we're just going to.
So are you also encouraging the other committees to make sure that we're?
That's a good idea, actually. So for all committees, that's a good idea. For all committees, there is a policy, and I don't have the name of it on my off the top of my head, but I can email it to you later, that delineates what each committee should be doing. So it does behoove us to check every once in a while and make sure that we are actually doing those things, that something hasn't slipped through the cracks, or that we haven't added, or we can add, but we need to make sure that that policy is clear. So in your next meeting, if you could address that policy and just make sure that FNF and PNN and whatever else is doing what they are supposed to be doing, that would be helpful just to keep us on track. Okay, let's see, PNN, that's probably, you will not be meeting anytime soon, so don't worry about that. Student Wellness Advisory Committee met Wednesday, January 3rd. That was Lisa. The next meeting will be Wednesday, May 8th at 3:30 p.m. At the SAU. HACTC meets next on Tuesday, March 19th at 10 a.m. at HACTC. The Area Committee will meet next on Tuesday, February 27th at Plainfield Elementary School at 6 p.m. The School District and City Task Force will meet next on Thursday, January 25th at 6 p.m. at City Hall. Are there any future agenda items, board member recommendations, or questions?
Just can we sort of think about outlining the board meeting calendar between now and at least March, but I think
we'll do it next meeting. Yeah, so we need to look at, some of our meetings fall during breaks, so we need to look at the meeting calendar going forward.
Yeah, and then after the vote, there's a waiting period, so March gets a little bit funky.
Yeah.
Okay, we will do that at the next meeting.
Also, the next meeting, we'll have a presentation from the sabbatical last year, so they will be coming to the board to do that.
Oh, good. That's the sabbatical for, who is that?
It was the English, did she go to Shakespeare?
Oh, yeah, it's English, Shakespeare. Okay. Okay. Important dates and district announcements. Our next school board meeting will be Wednesday, January 24th at 6:30 p.m. here. The deliberative session is Saturday, February 3rd at 9 a.m. also here. And the snow date for that session is February 5th at 6:30 p.m. here. Just as a point of information, the filing period for the municipal office, including school board positions, is Tuesday, January 23rd through Tuesday, February 13th at 5 p.m. And there are 3 positions up for election. And municipal elections will be held Tuesday, March 12th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I don't think there's anything else. Yes. Oh, no.
So one thing when, it's not time to adjourn, I have one more thought.
Quick, adjourn.
So when the student was talking about mental health and stuff like that, one thought came to mind. How do we, or do we ever sort of engage in a process where we look at sort of like how we might be creating or so like the structure of our days, the structure of our, like the way that we do our curriculums and stuff like that. So like, do we ever think about like how we're impacting student mental health? And do we look for ways to modify those things that we might identify through that process? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. We should be doing that, and I don't know that we consciously do that, but we can talk about that. And it sort of goes along with.
I think it's just an interest, you know, like if they're doing a lot of things trying to think about mental health and stuff like that, I think one argument about schools and institutions and stuff like that is that they impact just the structure of them and the day. And so like if we're doing mindfulness things, that's great, but if we're also creating the stress.
Yeah, and that's actually, we sort of mentioned this earlier, it's an part of that discussion could be how we approach, at least the high school level, how we approach midterms and finals and all those sorts of things as well.
It's sort of our structure.
Yeah. Okay.
My daughter says just let her stay home, and then she won't be stressed.
Every
every morning I
response.
stress her out.
Good response. Yes.
Just where did we end up on extending the MOU through the end of the year? Because doesn't that expire February 24th? So do we need to?
We've extended the MOU.
Okay, through the end of the school year?
Yeah,
Okay.
we did.
Just don't want to lose sight of a February date coming.
Right.
No,
Thank you.
No, we did that, yes. Oh, and today, which I'm working on, had a long discussion with the Washington School District that had the CRO, who was really helpful. And they're gonna send their MOU that they have, but it was really promising. Big district, 36,000 students.
Wow. So we'll modify.
3 different city police departments, but similar challenges that we've had, so it was really helpful.
It's
Great.
nice that they took the time with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
She didn't tell me we're small compared to that.
I did.
That's okay. Small is still important. Okay. Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
All right, Steve is motion to adjourn, seconded by Mary. Okay, and we are adjourned at 9:21.